Jian Wushuang stared at his body intently. As long as his body was complete, he could return and rely on it for defense. But there was still some way to go before his body reached perfection. At least another 10 years were needed. However, he couldn't wait any longer. If he continued like this, he faced the risk of falling into danger. He might have to give up if that happened. He had put in so much effort, and now half of the treasures he exchanged for were thrown into the universe bronze furnace. He felt unwilling. Buzz. Numerous cracks appeared on his divine body. I can't care about that anymore. He decided to risk it all. The damaged divine body and the incomplete physical body. He didn't know what would happen when the two merged. Jian Wushuang forcibly merged the two, regardless of their injuries, directly fusing them into one. Perfect integration. Well, it was originally his body. If they couldn't merge, that would be strange. The two shattered, devouring each other, merging. Phew! Jian Wushuang let out a breath. The divine body was finally no longer damaged, but the physical body was not yet complete. He had merged the divine body with the origin source in the wrong order. The reason why the physical body had to be separated was to prevent the inheritor's will from being unable to withstand it. A supreme physique was indestructible, but if the will perished, the person would be gone. Jian Wushuang was unaware of this. Just as he breathed a sigh of relief, the flames that tempered the physical body descended from the sky, along with the origin source and divine body he had just merged. The scorching sensation was hundreds of thousands of times hotter than the temperature inside the furnace. In an instant, his divine body collapsed, and the origin source extinguished along with it. Death came in a mere moment. His willpower held up surprisingly well, not dissipating with a single blow. However, under the relentless tempering of the flames, he couldn't withstand it for long. No! Jian Wushuang roared in anger, but his willpower seemed to defy his command, detaching itself from his entire body. Transcendence. There were two kinds. One was transcendence on the level of spatial matter. Once successful, it meant existence beyond the universe. The other was death. This time, Jian Wushuang clearly experienced transcendence through death. The origin source depleted, divine body shattered, leaving only a corpse with no purpose. His will gradually faded. Before his eyes, scenes from his life replayed. Is this the end? Jian Wushuang dared not blink, unwilling to miss any of the scenes before him. Everything he had once sworn to protect. There were comrades, mentors, brothers, and the world he had wanted to safeguard. After entering the Qixin temple, he had forgotten these things, or perhaps actively abandoned them, because he aimed to tread the path of an emperor. Traditionally, those who became emperors should sever all ties to mundane matters. Before his fall, he hadn't expected that his recollections wouldn't be about his path to becoming an emperor but the precious things he had once possessed. Xianxia, old master, farewell. Falling into the abyss, his willpower completely collapsed. In the outside world, Jian Wushuang had traversed for tens of thousands of years. The time he spent cultivating was beyond calculation, with time itself accelerating. In the realm of stars alone, he had practiced for countless billions of years. Memories scattered, and at the moment of his fall, a fragment of his spirit drifted into the origin sea of the Qixin universe. Qixin Temple, the Sea of Origin. Inside the Heart Sea Hall, the recently returned Jinling, with a slight investigation, discovered Jian Wushuang's fall. He felt a glimmer of joy. Jian Wushuang possessed the power of devouring. He had never understood whether it was an inheritance left behind by the original owner, obtained by this kid, or something he figured out himself. Regardless of the possibilities, he didn't want to see Jian Wushuang continue to grow stronger. No matter how far he went, even if he became the universe master, he would eventually fall. Why waste so many opportunities? Although Jinling didn't like Jian Wushuang, he also felt regretful. The ultimate Tao, the 10,000-fold divine body, and the supreme physical body were already achieved. There was no need to go through the 9 refinements. But now he had fallen, and it was his own fault. Such a genius. If he didn't possess the power of devouring, Jinling would have treated him specially, just like Hu Qing. But in his opinion, Hu Qing's potential was still not inferior to Jian Wushuang's. Hu Qing's foundation was more solid due to the past life, and he cultivated the Tao of enlightenment, which made him one of the most terrifying emperors in the future, comparable to practitioners of heart power. Enlightenment, skilled in deduction. Hu Qing's divine body was not weak either. In the future, when the treasures of Qishan Temple rained down, his strength and deduction abilities would advance together. When he became an emperor, he would undoubtedly shine brightly. Even if he couldn't reach the peak, he would still be able to dominate in the realm of emperors in the future. Just like the former sword Immortal, who became an invincible emperor. Any foe would fall to just one of her sword strike. Compared to these figures, Jian Wushuang was a strong individual who hadn't risen yet. His fall was also fate. Inside the Heart Sea Hall, Zhenling waved his hand, and time stood still. He wanted to see when Jian Wushuang had mastered the extreme Tao. A timeline unfolded, representing Jian Wushuang's life. For those without transcendent time abilities, life was a straight line. The scene changed. In the great desolate wilderness, Jian Wushuang stood alone, blocking the remnants of emperors. On the road of immortal bones, he was besieged by a massive army of corpses. At that time, he also saw Hu Qing. Even witnessing Hu Qing's awakening and his battle with the perfected 9 revolutions, time passed slowly until the moment Jian Wushuang awakened his heart power. Zhenling looked at a long sequence of timelines, but no matter how he dragged them, the scenes remained still. However, along the timeline, there was a significant stretch where the images only began to move when it approached the end. Scenes of several monks sacrificing themselves. What exactly happened here? Zhenling was shocked this time. He couldn't see the events that took place in between. Despite having a long timeline spanning billions of years, he couldn't observe the intermediate events. Has Jian Wushuang transcended time? This was utterly impossible. A grand Yen Immortal couldn't escape the flow of time. Zhenling couldn't believe it and didn't want to believe it. Even the Qishan Temple couldn't escape the timeline. If someone truly escaped, they would have perished. Only some treasures could achieve a limited detachment from the timeline, like within the Heart Sea Hall. No, this child cannot perish. Zhenling immediately stood up and personally manipulated the Heart Sea Hall. He collected Jian Wushuang's true spirit fragments and placed them in a small jade bottle. Then he resumed his meditation in front of the chessboard. He mobilized the entire cosmic sea, unleashing the power of the Heart Sea Pavilion. With Jian Wushuang's true spirit fragments, he could trace that significant portion of the timeline to understand what had happened. If Jian Wushuang had truly transcended time, he had to consider the possibility that Jian Wushuang was the reincarnation of a powerful being. Considering his strength, it was entirely plausible. A 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal could rival an emperor, possessing all-encompassing power. His divine body was 5,000 times stronger than an emperor's, and his origin source was even more robust. If that were the case, Zhenling would have to revise his opinion of Jian Wushuang. He couldn't suppress Jian Wushuang. He would have to show deference when the time came. An existence that transcended time. Such individuals were rare. Not even the Qishan Temple had seen many of them. A formidable figure. Zhenling inhaled sharply, then accessed that portion of the timeline. Indeed, Jian Wushuang had transcended time. It was a beautiful expanse of stars. Enchanting. Star map records? Zhenling rubbed his chin. It appeared to be a vast starry map, but when Jian Wushuang was within it, this star map seemed more like the entire world. As he continued watching, Zhenling couldn't help but gasp in shock. The starry sky was real, transcending time and space as if the whole world could be seen on a piece of paper. Such mastery was unimaginably terrifying. Whoosh! The scene suddenly rotated. In the endless cosmic expanse, the universe was like grains of sand, and the river of time and space pulsated, appearing incredibly minuscule. Just as Zhenling was still looking down, suddenly, in the boundless starry sky, a giant eye opened, its enormous gaze fixed on Zhenling's tiny green eyes. Zhenling was directly frightened out of his wits, frantically trying to swipe away the image, but he couldn't exit no matter what he did. Thump! Jinling was so scared that he sat down on the ground. What was that? Elder. I didn't mean to disturb. Jinling couldn't even complete his sentence, quickly falling to his knees. A single glance caused ripples across the entire cosmic sea. If it weren't for the suppression of the Heart Sea Hall, such a treasure, the very origin source of the universe, might have collapsed. When Jinling raised its head again, the single eye slowly closed. The owner of the eye seemed like a part of the void itself. Even with Jinling's formidable power, its true form remained hidden. Once the eye had completely vanished, Jinling breathed a sigh of relief. Unbeknownst to Jian Wushuang, he found himself breaking into a cold sweat. Jinling dared not delve further into Jian Wushuang's timeline. Hastily, he retrieved the fragments from the bottle and returned them to the depths of the Demon Sound Mountain. Having completed this task, Jinling rearranged the Heart Sea Hall, isolating all spaces and times. Then it immediately sent a message to Shen-1. Jinling was impatient, and even opened the Heart Sea Hall directly, disregarding the consumption of the universe's origin source, forcibly teleporting Shen-1 over. Shen-1, still engrossed in his puppet research, looked up to find himself in the Heart Sea Hall. He sensed something amiss. Seeing Jinling's anxious expression, he knew that something significant had occurred. The two of them held an intense discussion. This conversation was exceptionally secretive. With the protection of the Heart Sea Hall, even entities transcending timelines couldn't pry into their discussion. In this manner, Jinling also felt unsafe. Ever since he saw that eye, he constantly felt a chill down his spine, as if he wasn't even safe within the Heart Sea Hall. His conversation with Shen-1 was tense, especially when it came to Jian Wushuang. He was extra cautious. The owner of that eye was definitely more powerful than the existence Qixin had encountered when it escaped the timeline. Is it true? Shen-1 found it hard to believe. Lower your voice and mind your demeanor. Jinling quickly gestured for Shen-1 to be discreet. But Shen-1, sitting there, remained silent, lost in thought. The senior who had found him had indeed mentioned that a supremely powerful being was going to emerge in this world. However, according to the information provided, this being wasn't Jian Wushuang. Could it be that there were two supremely powerful beings? Or perhaps the senior had overlooked something. This seemed highly unlikely, considering that the senior was also a being that transcended the timelines. The senior had predicted a future calamity, during which an extraordinary being would be born. To forge this being, it would require practitioners from the entire river of time and space to be sacrificed. Shen-1 was truly a tortoise. His eyes were very similar to Jinling's, both of them having eyes like green beans that constantly rotated. Guishi, what are you thinking? What did that senior say back then? Jinling grew impatient, his temper flaring. Shen-1 suddenly snapped back to reality, slamming the chessboard heavily. Elle seemed to understand now. That senior must have foreseen this day when he first came to this world. He used my name to create avatars in every domain of this universe, nurturing many strong individuals. This can be verified by checking the timelines of those grand Yen immortals. That senior also manipulated causality. Jinling furrowed his brows, his voice deepening. Shen-1, a fellow grand Yen immortal, appeared before him, constantly inspecting timelines. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Only in Jian Wushuang's memories. There's someone named Shen-1 with some issues. The others don't quite fit. There's a concubine of a grand Yen immortal named Shen-1, but that's unlikely. But one thing puzzles me. This being can escape the timelines and conceal their past. Why am I able to see it?" Jinling voiced his doubts. Perhaps he anticipated it? Their conversation came to an abrupt halt. If that was the case, Jinling had to consider whether he should get rid of Jian Wushuang. He could be a menace, dragging along the river of time when he ascended in the future. However, the eye in the starry sky made Jinling hesitate. He deeply regretted delving into Jian Wushuang's timelines. If he hadn't, he wouldn't be worrying so much now, and Jian Wushuang might have perished directly, sparing him the anxiety. Elle don't think the two are closely related. The being you mentioned seems quite different from the senior I met. Jian Wushuang is probably best left alone. We should focus on finding the one we're looking for. They might not have entered the Qixin temple. We should expedite the relocation plan. As for where to go, choose a powerful river of time with some buffer space. Xian Wen spoke cautiously. Zhenling nodded along, then gave Xian Wen a meaningful look. After Xian Wen left, Zhenling stood beside a pillar in the Heart Sea Hall, his gaze profound. Clearly, he was contemplating Xian Wen's words. Was this river of time easy to destroy? Indeed, this river of time was too weak. The universe masters were just legends, and any extraordinary figure could potentially overturn everything. However, in some powerful rivers of time where eternal forces resided, the situation might be different. If that being truly was in the Qixin temple, Zhenling would be willing to witness that scene. In any case, they were strong individuals who emerged from the Qixin lineage. The Qixin lineage could become great once again. Jian Wushuang. It probably isn't him, although all the signs pointed to Jian Wushuang. He had a premonition that it wasn't him but someone else. In one vision, he saw that Grand Yen Immortal. Despite hiding deeply, many cultivators encountered benefactors, powerful masters, or mysterious masters. However, this Grand Yen Immortal met several formidable masters, and behind these masters were figures, one of whom had no timeline or had some fabricated timelines. That figure was the senior Xian Wen mentioned. Jian Wushuang was merely a smokescreen. As for that he didn't dare explore further. Jian Wushuang's journey was still far from its end. A glance pierced through the original universe, focusing on a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal on the original planet Alpha 1. This Grand Yen Immortal, disguised as a perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, cultivated inside a time chamber. He was recognized as the strongest being on the original planet Alpha 1, possessing Emperor-level strength. This person swept through the entire original planet, effortlessly defeating numerous devouring demons during the second stage trial. Zhenling noted down this person, formulating a plan in his mind. The senior either underestimated the situation or believed that this universe would produce 2 supremely powerful beings. Regardless, these 2 individuals would be the focus of future cultivation, especially Jian Wushuang. However, one couldn't reveal too many details, as it might shift from being unintentional to intentional. After reaching the summit, there would likely be a scrutiny of one's entire life. Powerful individuals like them didn't want to be treated as pawns. The universe revolved. The heavens and earth spun. All the laws had long been established. Breaking free from space, mastering time. Though not in this particular time and space, they existed in a corner of the starry sky. Demon Sound Mountain. In the universe Bronze Furnace, the extinguished consciousness unexpectedly reformed, and the origin source and divine body erupted once again. Jian Wushuang had somehow come back to life. Even he felt a bit bewildered. All of this was real. He had come back to life. Death lingered at the moment it had just occurred. The force of revival propelled him back to his peak. Without much time to ponder, the shattered divine body and origin source had already integrated into his flesh. The scorching heat of the flames once again swept over him. This time, in his peak state and armed with the experience from just moments ago, he managed to withstand it. Willpower is related to one's state of mind. The stronger his state of mind, the more resilient his willpower. He endured through the first wave, the second wave, and even the final wave, originally intended to temper his physical body. Now both the origin source and the divine body were simultaneously refining into his flesh. The first in history. Even Zhenling couldn't help but be shocked when witnessing this. Is this the 10th refinement? Haha. It seems a little guy has created the 10th refinement. Let's add another layer. Zhenling waved his hand, and Jian Wushuang's figure entered another space. Just as he was thinking of finding a reason to bestow treasures upon Jian Wushuang, it seemed that the opportunity had presented itself. However, this was also because Jian Wushuang was strong enough to resist and even innovatively create the 10th refinement. Swoosh! After being transported to another space, Jian Wushuang took a good look at his own body. The entire body was naked, The skin was crystal clear, exceptionally round, and due to the skeletal structure, his upper body was extremely strong. Only the hair had changed color, turning white. White hair and face, with only the eyes carrying a hint of blood. The candle dragon eye on his forehead emitting a glow. Phew! With a breath, it was indeed a clone. The clone had no aura. Transform. Swoosh! The clone instantly turned into a feather, lightly floating. Jian Wushuang's thought power was extremely strong, enveloping the feather, making it impossible to perceive any aura on it, just feeling like an ordinary feather. Such ability is even more powerful than what Qiu Huang described. Jian Wushuang's face lit up with joy. Before he could fully enjoy it, a phantom woman suddenly appeared in front of him. Jian Wushuang. The woman's voice was cold, startling Jian Wushuang. Just as he was about to bow in greeting, he suddenly realized that he was not wearing anything. He quickly took out a clean python robe from the Sumer world and put it on. White hair, adorned with the python robe, gave him a majestic aura. Facing the cold woman, Jian Wushuang cautiously responded. He had initially thought he would directly enter the demon sealing space or be welcomed by Shan Jun unexpectedly. A phantom woman appeared suddenly. On the orders of Zhenling, I hereby reward you for creating the 10th refinement of the supreme physique. Jian Wushuang was somewhat puzzled. The 10th refinement? Could it be because he refined both the divine body and the origin source together? Indeed, there was a possibility of this nature. No wonder his physical body was much stronger than Qiu Huang had described, able to simulate various substances. After receiving the reward, without even having the chance to thank this Zhenling, the illusory woman departed. She came quickly and left just as swiftly. Jian Wushuang didn't dwell on it. He wasn't aware that the illusory woman was a transformation of Zhenling within the Qixin temple. The Demon Sound Mountain had almost been emptied. There were no more figures there, and the emperors couldn't enter. The Elder Palace had just taken over, and it was unlikely for them to arrive so quickly. With a wave of his hand, the reward jade box flew over. Upon opening it, Jian Wushuang was pleasantly surprised to find a light green board inside. Fitting perfectly on his thumb, he put it on, and at that moment, a scene appeared in his mind. It was a majestic deity teaching sentient beings in his own Taoist temple. Above the Taoist temple, many people were seated. The scene gradually disappeared. Jian Wushuang only remembered that there were several ancient characters written above. Qixin. He recognized it. It was Qixin lecturing, and on Qixin's right thumb, holding an ancient book, there was also a light green board. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's breath became constrained. Regardless of whether this board had any practical use, it held great significance as a collector's item. A board that Qixin had carried for years inevitably contained Qixin's aura to some extent or even encapsulated Qixin's great Tao, making it extremely precious. He carefully rotated the board. His mind became ethereal, and his cultivation speed increased by more than 100-fold. Moreover, this board contained a miniature universe. He moved it slightly. The enormous black and white yin-yang taiji array suddenly appeared. It was actually an array that protected tranquility. Although this treasure didn't substantially enhance his strength, it was undoubtedly the top-notch auxiliary treasure. For a moment, holding it in his hands, he found it hard to let go. This feeling he hadn't experienced in countless years. Like a child with a toy he couldn't stop playing. His entire spirit improved significantly, and his thought power was stronger than before. It's time to leave. Jian Wushuang stood in place, waiting quietly. His feet rotated slightly, radiating numerous rays of light. He hadn't noticed. In an instant, his figure disappeared from the original spot and reappeared at the summit of the Demon Sound Mountain. Jian Wushuang looked around. The place where the demon sealing pillar was placed now had a deep pit. What happened? Where was Shan Jun? The surroundings had changed too. The Demon Sound Mountain, which was initially in a void, was now within a lake. Though vast, Jian Wushuang guessed it was a lake because it was freshwater. The sky was azure. It had been a long time since he entered the real world. Little guy. A familiar voice rang out, pulling Jian Wushuang's thoughts back. Turning around, he was surprised to see the old man with goat horns. "Senior Yang, why are you here?" Jian Wushuang asked in amazement. Yang Sanmu smiled faintly. "L should be the one surprised that you're here." Listening to the old man, Jian Wushuang learned that the Demon Sound Mountain had been moved to the core of the 4 major secret realms, and Shanjun had been captured. This made Jian Wushuang feel extremely guilty. It must be the calamity caused by devouring that universe origin source. If one day he attained the Tao, he would surely rescue Shanjun. For this reason, he unknowingly accumulated a lot of karma. Karma cycles, following the will of heaven. Fruits of karma, evil consequences, causal relationships. He had taken control of what he could, and the causal relationships were manageable. Shanjun had assisted him without demanding much, and back when Xianxia and Old Master had helped, they also had few requirements. However, the power of karmic fruits was continuously growing, and it had to be eradicated before advancing in the Tao. As for evil consequences, this was related to his strength. Once he broke through to the 7th level of the extreme Tao, mastering the power of all things, he would be able to escape the evil consequences of the power of Devour. All 3 had solutions, yet they were extremely difficult. Jian Wushuang shook his head silently, deciding not to dwell on it for now. Returning was the priority. From Yang Sanmu, he had gained a rough understanding of the 4 major secret realms. He couldn't help but feel excited. He hadn't expected that an ancient continent still existed. After the trials ended and he entered the core, he vowed to explore it thoroughly. "Senior, how many experts are there in these secret realms?" Jian Wushuang couldn't help but ask. According to Yang Sanmu, the 4 major secret realms were vast, comparable to half the size of the universe. Their existence spanned longer than the birth of the universe itself, with the oldest inheritances and various geniuses and treasures. The experts here were likely several times more powerful than those born in the original universe. Jian Wushuang had seen the list of gods and demons in the universe. The original universe alone had tens of thousands of emperors, and even though the Tier 5 emperors had mostly gone to the River of Time, there were still dozens remaining. That didn't even account for the missing ones. The old man with horns seemed visibly stunned at the question. Since settling in the elderly palace, he hadn't had the chance to review the records sent by the White Tiger Temple about powerful individuals. However, based on his past experiences in the 4 major secret realms, he made a rough estimate. Just the experts in the northern region of the Heaven Secret Realm alone were much stronger than those in the original universe. There might be a numerical difference, but in terms of quality, they undoubtedly held the advantage. The original universe had countless grand Yen Immortals, surpassing even the northern region or the entire Heaven Secret Realm. However, it lacked in terms of emperors. The Tier 6 emperors, mentioned by the old man with the goat's horns, were numerous, a luxury the original universe did not possess, a universe without a single Tier 6 emperor. Certainly, in the original universe, there was an ultimate emperor, and the entire Qixin Temple lacked such an ultimate emperor. If there was one, it was probably slumbering in the divine tomb. An ultimate emperor was more crucial than several Tier 6 emperors combined. Especially that ultimate emperor, who was on the verge of reaching the peak. Crossing the Tier 6 was just a matter of time, with Zhenling personally guiding the way. Martial prowess wasn't the urgent matter. The critical aspects were the secrets of the universe and one's own origin source. Once these 2 breakthroughs occurred, reaching the pinnacle would only be a matter of time. After hearing the explanation from the old man with goat horns, Jian Wushuang nodded. The Qixin Temple was much more formidable than he had imagined, but he still had a question. Why did the Qixin Temple have so many powerful beings, yet they went through such great lengths to recruit inheritors from the original universe? In his opinion, recruiting an ultimate emperor would have sufficed. Casting a wide net to catch few fish seemed wasteful. Ha ha! Goat Three Eyes laughed upon hearing Jian Wushuang's confusion. Youngster, it's a bit challenging for you. There are some things you don't understand now, but you will in the future. Remember, innate talent can never surpass predestination. The cultivators in the Qixin Temple are all born with postnatal advantages. Jian Wushuang found the explanation a bit confusing, but the last sentence stuck with him. Was his postnatal physical body truly weaker than those innate beings? Maybe not now, but it might not be the case in the future. Aren't the beast gods strong enough? Yet, they were still killed by the Qixin refined into treasures. Who dares to say that Qixin is not powerful? After chatting for a while, a middle-aged man in a yellow Taoist robe, with a tall crown and a wax-yellow complexion, walked out of a spatial crack. The moment he emerged, Jian Wushuang felt a powerful pressure, rendering his entire body immobile. Are you Jian Wushuang? The newcomer was Wu Zhuo, who had just seen off Shan Jun. Jian Wushuang pays respects to senior. Jian Wushuang bowed slightly. Was Zhou eased the pressure. Zhenling instructed that this guy must be safely returned to the original planet, and he didn't dare to bully the small. Now, among the Qixin temple, the most valued were these inheritors. Although he felt somewhat dissatisfied, he didn't dare to act recklessly. Cultivating in peace, those days had just passed, and now he had to be honest. Moreover, when he sent Shan Jun into the second prison, Shan Jun instructed him to take care of the little guy on Demon Sound Mountain. Although their relationship was ordinary, the 5 demon lords had once been glorious together, a united front. Giving face to Shan Jun was giving face to the other 4. He knew that besides Shan Jun and the Heart Demon being sent to prison, the remaining ones had done well in the Qixin Temple, especially that Wind Demon and Myriad Demon. They had become prominent figures by Zhenling's side. Don't be so nervous. The trial on the original planet still has 2 days left. Are you planning to go back now or stay here on Yuanyang Lake? Wu Zhuo asked. Jian Wushuang was relieved to hear that he could stay and look around. On the side, Yang Sanmu patted his shoulder, gave him a look and said, "Thank you, Brother Wu Zhuo. Thank you, Lord Wu Zhuo. Don't thank me. These 2 days, Brother Yang will take Jian Wushuang to explore Yuanyang Lake. I will personally send you back when you leave," Wu Zhuo said. As soon as he finished speaking, a snake as thick as a water tank shot out. Wu Zhuo stood on the snake's head, glanced at Jian Wushuang, especially at the faint green board on Jian Wushuang's thumb. His eyes narrowed to a point, but he didn't dare to ask more. He disappeared in the same place. Jian Wushuang, who stood up straight, had a strange look in his eyes. He could feel that his luck seemed to have changed. Shan Jun helped him because they were of the same kind. Wu Zhuo took great care of him, probably because of the board. The overflow of this board's power might be showing now, and he had underestimated it before. The person just now must have seen the board, recognized it as an artifact of Qixin, and thus took care of him and allowed him to stay here. Yang Sanmu, standing on the side, was also somewhat surprised. Usually arrogant Wu Zhuo, this time was unexpectedly approachable, even letting Jian Wushuang stay here. It seemed that the Zhenling hadn't specifically instructed anything. He only said to send Jian Wushuang back to the original realm intact. Perhaps Wu Zhuo was too cautious, Yang Sanmu speculated. Senior Yang, who was that Lord Wu Zhuo just now? Jian Wushuang cautiously inquired now that the threat had completely receded. The strength of the person just now was formidable, at least stronger than any emperor he had encountered, and not inferior to Shan Jun. Him. Yang Sanmu's eyes carried a reminiscing color, slowly saying, "He is a disciple of Qixin, the only disciple still alive, a Tier 6 powerhouse. Disciple of Qixin?" Jian Wushuang was greatly shocked. No wonder he recognized the board on his thumb. Even Yang Sanmu, the old man with horns, was unaware of this treasure. "All right, you only have 2 days, so cherish them. This is the map of the area near Yuanyang Lake. If you want to leave the lake, you can take the teleportation array to the northern region and explore those ancient sects." Ancient sects. Jian Wushuang swallowed. "Let's go now." But, with a smile on his face, Yang Sanmu waved his hand, and a giant ancient boat appeared in the sky. The ancient boat was rather simple, with only a small pavilion and a puppet fisherman at the front. Once on the ancient boat, Jian Wushuang discovered a familiar aura, an eternal aura. "Is this an eternal treasure?" Jian Wushuang asked calmly, somewhat uncertain. Yang Sanmu widened his eyes and exclaimed, "Kid, Your eyesight is not bad. Indeed, it was an eternal treasure. Among the fifth-rank emperors, Yang Sanmu was one of the wealthiest, even surpassing some less fortunate sixth-rank emperors. Apart from the treasures of the universe, he had collected all kinds of eternal treasures, from top-notch to ordinary. This ancient boat was one of them. It hadn't been brought out since ancient times. The power of eternal treasures was boundless. With a slight movement, they could transform into a stream of light, heading straight for the end of the sky. First, Yang Sanmu took Jian Wushuang to the central palace above Yuanyang Lake, where there was a large hall responsible for teleportation, connecting to the Northern Territory. Due to time constraints, they couldn't delve deep into the Northern Territory. Instead, they could only seek out some ancient sects on the outskirts for a casual visit. To call it a visit was, in fact, just a sightseeing tour. Entering the teleportation hall, Jian Wushuang saw a familiar face. Senior Qiu Huang. Qi Huang's appearance was different from when they were in the treasure hall. Now, sitting at the center, he exuded a majestic aura, his strength already restored to its peak. A Tier 5 peak emperor. In the Elder's Palace, even the weakest emperors were Tier 5 emperors. Otherwise, they would have been eliminated long ago. Emperors below the tier were deemed useless. Hee. I knew it was you, kid. In the Demon Sound Mountain, Qiu Huang grinned, as if he had already guessed. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and said, Senior is truly wise. Cut the nonsense. The trial in the original realm is about to begin. Hurry up and go in. The old man with sheep horns frowned. He had a low opinion of Qiu Huang. In terms of seniority, he had far more experience. As one of the first emperors plundered, he maintained an air of seniority towards newcomers like Qiu Huang. Little Qiu Huang, I brought Wushuang here not to return to the original realm but to go to the northern region. Open the array quickly, the old man with horns ordered. Qiu Huang stood up directly from his throne. This body was just one of his avatars. His true self was in seclusion, cultivating. A slender figure rose suddenly, creating a substantial momentum. After all, he was a Tier 5 peak emperor. Even as an avatar, he possessed the strength of an ordinary Tier 5 emperor. This place was the central hub of the Elder's Palace, and the avatar seated here naturally had to be formidable. The northern region? The trial is about to begin. Why go to the northern region now? The old man with goat horns spoke with a touch of anger. Brother Wu's was specially arranged for Wushuang to stay for 2 more days to familiarize himself. Besides, when he goes back, Brother Wu's will personally escort him. You don't need to worry about it. Upon hearing Wu's intentions, Qi Huang's gaze towards Jian Wushuang became even more incredulous. In just a few days, Jian Wushuang had already established a connection with Wu's. Jian Wushuang stood on the side, nodding in agreement. Sorry for the trouble, Senior Qiu Huang. Whoosh! The two stepped into the array, and in an instant they crossed countless domains. Northern region, also known as the Northern Territory. In the ancient territory of Liuzhou, there lay the city of Sharuo. The vast expanse of Liuzhou was almost as large as a high-level realm, with Sharuo City ranking among the top 3 major cities. Only such ancient cities boasted teleportation arrays. Arrays of this scale could bankrupt a grand yen Immortal with each activation, a cost affordable only to emperors. Fortunately, each activation could transport tens of thousands, making it feasible for some 9 revolutions grand yen Immortals to operate it. The ancient and massive teleportation array stood at the heart of Sharuo City, adjacent to the city lord's mansion. Constructed by a Tier 5 emperor, who tragically fell during a sect battle, the management of this supercity fell to his descendants. The current city lord, though not a Tier 5 emperor, was a highly esteemed 4th-tier peak-level emperor in the region. When Patriarch Sharuo fell, the city should have changed hands, but the Tier 4 emperor showed great boldness. He directly went to the White Tiger Temple after the sect battle and gifted Sharuo City to the White Tiger Temple. Naturally, the White Tiger Temple accepted the gift, and no one dared to harbor ill intentions. However, at that time there was a shortage of manpower, so the 4th-tier emperor took charge temporarily. Although this was the official story, there were hidden details known only to the people of the White Tiger Temple and the emperor. Outside the teleportation array, A team of emperors stood guard year-round, protecting the array. Of course, what outsiders saw were only hundreds of Dao Lord-level Grand Yen Immortals and one emperor in black from the City Lord's mansion. This emperor team belonged to the White Tiger Temple and usually practiced within the White Tiger branch. They rarely ventured outside. Even though the four major secret realms were chaotic, the chaos only reached the pinnacle. Emperors with weaknesses shivered at the sight of White Tiger Temple members and dared not cause trouble. Those who dared to cause trouble possessed the strength of either a Tier 5 or even a Tier 6 emperor. At this moment, many powerful individuals came and went outside the teleportation array. So, this is Liuzhou, a young man in a white robe, wearing a high crown, exceptionally dignified in demeanor but somewhat frivolous in behavior, remarked. Though only a Grand Yen Immortal, his strength approached the threshold of a half-step emperor. He was a distinguished figure in the sect. He was a prince with a noble status. Following behind him were other outstanding figures from the sect, each possessing Dao Lord-level strength. Among this group of handsome men and beautiful women was an elderly man who appeared the least conspicuous but held the strongest power, a third-tier emperor. Old Gu, I think Sharo City is just SOSO. It's not as good as our Muyu City. The dignified young man expressed disdain for the ancient Sharo City as soon as he spoke. However, the elderly man, Old Gu, smiled with a kind expression, explaining, "Young master, don't underestimate Sharo City. When the Lord of Sharo City roamed Liuzhou in the past, this place was bustling. That's all in the past." The young master, with a hint of disdain, led the group down the teleportation array, casting a disdainful glance at the crowded surroundings. Teleporting between cities was an expense they could afford individually, without crowding with those people. "Master Jin, let's first go to the City Lord's mansion. I have a friend among the emperors in the City Lord's mansion, and they will arrange for someone to take us to the Xianxia Palace." Old Go stepped forward, the wrinkles on his face trembling. "Good. It's time to find a quiet place for a while." At the same time, another group of people had the same destination, the Xianxia Palace. A group of 13 people, young and old. Leading them was a young man in green, also a Tier 3 emperor. What was peculiar was that he carried a broken sword on his back. The habit of carrying a sword on one's back was rare among cultivators, let alone a broken one. Among them, 3 were Dao Lords and 9 were half-step Dao Lords. 100 Godstones. Outside the teleportation array, a cold voice echoed from the mouth of a Dao Lord-level guard. The young man in green casually produced a neat stack of 100 Godstones. These were the hard currency of the 4 great secret realms, each Godstone containing the origin of space. Although extremely rare, their abundance couldn't be ignored. If converted to the external value, 1 Godstone was roughly equivalent to an ordinary treasure. "Senior Nye, didn't we already pay Godstones in Muyu City? Why do we have to give another 100? A girl in a green skirt pouted, her round face looking quite charming. Not waiting for that Senior Nye to respond, the prestigious young master who had not left yet took over the conversation. "Little girl, this is the rule, the temple's rule. Ask your master if he dares to touch it. If he does, he can demand back those 100 Godstones. Is that you? Wei Liang." The young master turned his head, recognizing the speaker. All were formidable figures from Muyu City, and they mostly knew each other. However, these two groups were at odds. Old Gu, seeing the leading man named Nye, also wore a stern expression. Buzz. As the two groups confronted each other, the 3-layered teleportation array emitted a buzzing sound. "Look, it's the 3rd-layer teleportation array, crossing state teleportation. Even powerful figures from other major states are here for the grand ceremony of the Xianxia Palace." Swish, swish. 2 figures appeared in the 3rd-layer teleportation array. Crossing state teleportation usually involved Tier 3 or even Tier 4 Emperor Lords. As long as the other party wasn't a Tier 6 Emperor Lord, there was money to be made. This time, it was the City Lord's black-robed Emperor Lord who personally welcomed them. Crossing state teleportation, 1,000 God stones. The black-robed Emperor Lord's voice was gentle. Despite his high position, he showed the necessary respect for powerful emperor lords. In the teleportation array, an old and a young figure stood. It was their first time in this liuzhou, and even before they descended from the teleportation array, they heard the price of 1,000 godstones. They were a bit dumbfounded. Godstones? What on earth is that? These two were none other than Yang Sanmu and Jian Wushuang, who had come from Yuanyang Lake. Seeing the expressions of the two newcomers, the black-robed Emperor Lord felt some surprise. They didn't even know what godstones were, and yet they entered the teleportation array. With a movement of divine power, he examined them from top to bottom. The old man's strength was unfathomable, and the young one had the aura of an emperor, but his essence was that of a Tao Lord. Strange. These two were very peculiar. However, as a member of the City Lord's mansion, backed by the White Tiger Temple, the black-robed emperor felt no fear. He immediately instructed the City Lord's mansion. "Friend, are you joking? You don't even know about godstones. How did you get on the teleportation array?" The black-robed Emperor Lord's voice had turned cold. Outside the teleportation array, many onlookers revealed expressions of astonishment. These two were in trouble. The teleportation array belonged to the City Lord's mansion, but it was maintained by the temple, and no one dared to provoke the temple's authority. Tier 6 Emperor is not enough. Humph! The old man with goat's horns had always had a strange temper. Seeing such disrespect, he was ready to take action. As a peak Tier 5 Emperor skilled in refining treasures, he could rival Tier 6 Emperors in status. Even the Universe Masters had treated him with respect. Now, a mere Tier 3 Emperor dared to be so disrespectful. The black-robed Emperor sensed the threat and angrily shouted, "How bold!" Before the words could settle, the old man with sheep's horns made a big claw, and a massive hand directly grabbed the black-robed Emperor. The violent aura instantly shook the entire teleportation array, even affecting its formation. "It's over." Many people hastily retreated, watching from a distance. They were certain that these two individuals were in trouble for daring to attack the Emperor of the City Lord's mansion on the teleportation array. Whoosh! 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 Several figures shot out, all dressed in silver robes. This was a team of emperors stationed by the White Tiger Temple, led by a Tier 5 Emperor, with the rest being peak Tier 4, totaling 9 individuals. At the same time, emperors from the City Lord's mansion rushed over. The commotion had directly alarmed the City Lord. He brought 3 Tier 4 emperors, making it a total of 4. In an instant, the strongest emperors in Sharuo City had gathered. "You have the guts to be so presumptuous here," said a Tier 5 emperor in a golden robe, who was the leader. He was the steward of the outer hall of the White Tiger Temple, with the combat power of a Tier 5 emperor. The White Tiger Temple had numerous outer halls besides the main hall. Divided into the heaven, the earth, and the human halls, Sharuo City belonged to the Earth Hall, with a Tier 5 golden-robed emperor presiding over it. Throughout Liuzhou, there was only one heaven hall, not in Sharuo City, and it was the place where the purple-robed elder, a Tier 6 emperor and the strongest among the 4 secret realms, resided. He was also the one with the highest status. The White Tiger Temple had established several heavenly halls in the entire northern region, and there happened to be one near Liuzhou, close to the central state. The steward in the golden robe was a Tier 5 emperor, the same level as the old man with goat horns, but their combat powers were worlds apart. Just like an ordinary 9 revolutions compared to Jian Wushuang. A vast difference. Hee. The White Tiger Temple really flaunts its authority. The old man with horns. Gaze turned icy. Now the entire northern region was under the jurisdiction of the Elder Palace. In the future, White Tiger Hall would also be expelled from this place. Jian Wushuang stood behind the old man with sheep's horns, witnessing the old man's actions for the first time, equally shocked. He wasn't worried about these people daring to do anything. The Elder Palace and the White Tiger Hall were both core forces of the Qixin Temple. No one would trouble them. Challengers of the temple shall be executed. The golden-robed emperor drew a long knife, slashing through space with a forceful strike. Other emperors also charged forward. With so many emperors in battle, even if Sharuo City were sturdy, it might be damaged by half. The city lord's face turned serious. He hadn't encountered such a reckless youth in many years. Why did he have to run into one now? Once the great formation of Sharo City was damaged, it might not be rebuilt in the same location. Sharo City was ranked in the top 3 in Liuzhou because of this great formation. Boom! 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 Numerous clusters of divine power were pinched by the old man with sheep's horns, turning into dots with a pinch. Then, he casually took out a red gourd from his waist, and all the dots were collected inside. In the sky, only broken space remained, but there was no damage around. Inform Elder Lai Hua, come to Sharo City quickly. There's a suspected encounter with a Tier 6 Emperor. The golden-robed Emperor's face was grim. This time, it's uncertain whether the other party is completely finished, but he's definitely in trouble. Encountering a Tier 6 Emperor, if the other party refuses to submit to the Qixin Temple and casually kills him, there won't be any place for grievances. If it weren't for the limited time, I'd teach you a lesson. The old man with goat horns snorted coldly. With only 2 days this time, they had to make good use of their time to visit nearby ancient sects and let Jian Wushuang broaden his horizons before returning. Let's go! The old man with goat horns took out the ancient boat and, together with Jian Wushuang, boarded it. Just as they were about to leave, the space in the Sharo City trembled, and a formidable presence descended. Master Lai Hua, wherever he went, flames rose. An illusory face appeared in the sky, gazing at the old man with goat horns and Jian Wushuang. Brother Sanmu, long time no see. The fiery face in the sky had an imposing voice that reverberated in all directions. If the authority descended, the entire Sharo City would probably be destroyed. The old man with goat horns grinned, pointing to the sky, excitedly saying, Lai Hua, you're still alive. Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief at these words. In these 4 great secret realms, powerful individuals abounded. They had just arrived in Sharo City and already encountered one. Of course, if they hadn't taken action, they probably wouldn't have met a Tier 6 Emperor so easily. The golden-robed Emperor was somewhat dazed. Listening to the old man with goat horns, it seemed that he knew Master Lai Hua. Swoosh! The face in the sky was a manifestation of Master Lai Hua, appearing before the actual person. In just about a breath's time, Master Lai Hua himself arrived. Upon closer inspection, Master Lai Hua wore a purple robe, had fiery red hair, and a rugged face. Ha ha ha, you're still alive. How could I bear to die? Master Lai Huff's demeanor and temperament were both hearty. Well, you've been in the heaven world all these years and never joined the divine tomb, sighed the old man with goat horns. The two had known each other since ancient times when they were both Tier 5 emperors. Now, the Venerable Blaze was a Tier 6 existence and the lord of the celestial hall of the White Tiger Temple. On the other hand, the old man with goat horns remained at Tier 5, affiliated with the Elder Palace and holding the title of Senior Elder. As the Venerable Lai Hua stepped onto the ancient boat, he slapped the old man's shoulder heavily, excitedly saying, Come on, let's go to my place. It's been too long since the two of us had a good chat. Here? The old man with goat horns gestured toward the other emperors. Master Lai Hua turned his gaze to the emperors and said coldly, Today's events, consider them non-existent. Understand? Yes. The emperor in golden attire was sweating profusely, quickly bowing. The other emperors dared not even take a deep breath. After all, this was the master of the Heaven Hall, a Tier 6 emperor who could extinguish them with a breath. In the entire northern region, who would dare to resist? Lai Hua, I came here with a mission. The old man with goat horns also wanted to catch up with his old friend, but he had Jian Wushuang with him. He had made a promise to Wu Zhuo earlier. Jian Wushuang tactfully said, Senior Yang, please go ahead. I can explore on my own. Upon hearing this, the Venerable Lai Hua looked at Jian Wushuang. As a Tier 6 emperor, his keen eyes quickly discerned the uniqueness of Jian Wushuang, a grand Yen immortal whose origin source surpassed many emperors. Moreover, his aura was different from the practitioners in the 4 great secret realms. Is this the inheritor? Master Lai Hua transmitted his voice. He couldn't directly mention the matter of the inheritor, he could only communicate it to the old man with goat horns. This was an order from White Tiger's Supreme Hall, and even though he was a Tier 6 emperor, he didn't dare to disobey the Supreme Hall. Yes, he's not an ordinary inheritor. Brother Wu's was specifically instructed me to let him wander around the northern region for a couple of days and then return him to the original realm, replied the old man with goat horns. Upon hearing the name Wuxia, the Master Lai Hu shuddered. The existence mentioned held a status far higher than his. It was none other than the named disciple of Qixin, and his special orders were not to be disobeyed. After a personal farewell from Master Lai Hu, Jian Wushuang and the old man with goat horns departed from the city of Sheruo on the ancient boat. The onlookers, though unaware of their conversation, understood that these two individuals were extraordinary and possessed formidable strength. As Jian Wushuang and the old man sailed away, the countenance of Master Lai Hu turned cold, and he glanced at the emperor clad in golden attire. Be more discreet in the future. I won't be as forgiving next time. With those words, he swiftly left the scene. It wasn't a threat but a recognition that the entire heavenly realm was about to change. The White Tiger Temple would no longer dominate alone. He was aware of the Elder Palace's presence, and a large number of heirs would follow. The selected heirs would eventually settle in the heaven world's secret realms. With such arrogance, the Central Hall would surely impose penalties. The incident came to a close. The emperor in golden attire left with his followers, and Sheruo City Lord, from beginning to end, remained on the sidelines, completely ignored. This in itself was a kind of tragedy. White Tiger Temple resolved such disputes, and he had no say in the matter. However, without the White Tiger Temple, even with the former lord present, it would have been challenging to handle the situation. After dispersing, the onlookers began to disperse as well. Wei Liang, the young master, had a change in his expression. Originally planning to pay respects to the city lord, it seemed unnecessary now. It was better to head directly to the Xianxia Palace. The city lord's mood was probably not good at the moment, and they might face rejection if they went to pay respects. If it were a usual day, the lord liked to entertain the outstanding youngsters of Liuzhou. After young Master Wei Liang left in haste, the man named Nie, carrying a broken sword on his back, also departed. Several other groups, much like them, headed in the same direction. Senior Nie, who was that powerful figure in purple just now? A young girl on a small boat asked curiously. Most people were discussing the recent events. Since the journey was long and they couldn't concentrate on cultivation, they began talking about the recent happenings. Nie Yuan's gaze was profound, his complexion exhausted, possibly due to his broken sword. Upon hearing the girl's curiosity, a slight smile appeared on his face. He casually replied, "The existence you're asking about is the strongest in our Liuzhou, the master of the Heaven Hall, the respected Lai Hu. Stronger than the venerables of the Xianxia Palace?" the girl exclaimed in surprise. Upon hearing the words, Xianxia Palace Venerable, Nie Yuan's gaze turned icy, and his whole demeanor seemed to change. Even his arms trembled a bit. It was only when the imposing presence passed that they could see clearly. Nie Yuan not only had a broken sword but also a severed left arm. In the end, he just shook his head, choosing not to say anything more. On the other side, Jian Wushuang sat opposite the old man with sheep's horns in the low pavilion on the ancient boat. As they looked around on their journey, the scenery here was not much different from the outside world. Various sects stood tall, just with fewer ordinary people, or rather, no ordinary people at all. At this moment, in his hands, there was an old yellowed book, recording various secret texts of heaven realm secrets on the top. "Kid, this time we're heading to the Xianxia Palace. It's well documented in this book. This ancient sect is famous in all 4 major mysteries. Since its establishment, it has produced 2 Tier 6 emperors. Among them, Taoist Xianxia is a peak-level Tier 6 existence, the current sect master, and a formidable figure despite not surpassing the sect's founder in strength. However, there's still a lot of potential for growth in the northern region." Listening to the old man with goat horns, Jian Wushuang flipped open the book to read about the Xianxia Palace. Taoist Xianxia, starting from obscurity, founded the Xianxia Palace, and practiced the sword throughout. He's the supreme in sword Dao. Later, he descended to the god's tomb, sentenced to 100 epochs in the third prison, and upon release, after preaching in the human realm's secret realm for billions of years, returned to the Xianxia Palace and has not left since. Venerable Yu Qing, the current sect master, a sword Dao venerable, is the 6th generation leader of the Xianxia Palace, rising to prominence 100,000 epochs ago. The records about the Xianxia Palace's deeds were less than half a page. But the common thread of sword practice piqued his interest. According to the records, the Xianxia Palace would open its doors every epoch, inviting grand yen immortals from the northern region and even the entire heavenly realm to witness the sword tide. Each sword tide would attract many strong individuals, and even some Tier 5 emperors would attend. This time, Jian Wushuang was lucky enough to encounter the sword tide of this epoch. He wanted to see how formidable it could be. On his path of the ultimate Dao, he had been pursuing sword Dao, and there were very few who were stronger than him in the Great Sea region. On the original planet, he hadn't encountered a formidable sword practitioner. This time, he could finally observe the strength of ancient sword Dao. Buzz! The ancient ship accelerated with full force, taking only a quarter of an hour to reach the Xianxia Palace. The teleportation array established in the Sheruo city was also due to the influence of the Xianxia Palace. During the journey, Jian Wushuang and his companions encountered many fellow travelers, all heading to the Xianxia Palace. Nighest were Tier 3 emperors leading a group of juniors. Encounters with Tier 4 emperors were rare, and there were no encounters with Tier 5 emperors. The speed of the ancient ship left everyone in the dust. After all, it was an eternal treasure, and even though they were in one of the 4 major secret realms, eternal treasures were still rare here. Below the level of Tier 5 emperors, there were very few people who possessed an eternal treasure. Others, upon seeing the ancient ship ridden by Jian Wushuang, cleared the way. Anyone able to ride an eternal treasure was undoubtedly a significant figure. In the renowned northern region, a figure known throughout the entire expanse made his presence felt. Swoosh! The scenery before Jian Wushuang underwent a sudden transformation. He rose slowly and walked to the forefront of the ancient boat, standing shoulder to shoulder with the puppet fisherman. The silhouette of Xianxia Palace was becoming discernible. A majestic mountain range stretched for billions of miles, its end indiscernible. On the main peak, a colossal waterfall was clearly visible even from a distance. Approaching closer, the features of Xianxia Palace became clearer. The ancient boat suddenly came to a halt, and a barrier appeared ahead. Outside the barrier, numerous figures were suspended, disciples and elders of Xianxia Palace receiving powerful individuals from other sections. Seeing the ancient boat, a senior elder of Xianxia Palace's complexion changed. Immediately, he transmitted a message. Before long, a middle-aged man in a pale yellow robe was teleported through the barrier. Quick! It's the elder Zhujian of Xianxia Palace. Following the sound, many people looked over. Zhujian of Xianxia, one of the 9 great elders. Each of them was a Tier 5 emperor, the formidable individuals of the Xianxia Palace, not solely relying on Tier 6 emperors. The most renowned figures in the Xianxia Palace were the 9 swords among the emperors and the 13 Tai swords among the Dao lords. All of them were practically invincible among their peers, especially the 13 Tai swords among the Dao lords, each comparable to emperor-level powerhouses, and practicing the origin source of swordsmanship. Their combat strength was extremely formidable, with few rivals among their peers. The reason why so many Dao lords were attracted was to challenge the sword prodigies of the 13 Tai, swords during the sword observation event. The figure of the 9th sword elder flickered, arriving in front of the ancient boat, bowing respectfully and saying, "Is it Senior Yang who has graced us with his presence? Oh, you recognize me?" The old man with goat-like horns was somewhat surprised. Although he had heard of Xianxia Palace, he didn't recognize them. "It's Senior Lai Hua who sent a message to our palace master. I've come to welcome you," said the elder Zhujian with utmost respect. Elder Zhujian showed utmost respect. After all, the person in front of them had a significant connection with Senior Lai Hua. In all of Liuzhou, it was hard to assess who the strongest individual was, but Venerable Lai Hua definitely ranked in the top two. The other was Xianxia Patriarch. As someone comparable to the Patriarch, they couldn't afford to be negligent. Even though it was just a message, they still treated the situation with the highest level of formality. Leading Jian Wushuang, the old man with goat-like horns disembarked from the ancient boat and nodded approvingly. This was quite different from Senior Lai Huff's temperament. The old Lai Hua wasn't so meticulous before. It seemed that many people had changed over the years. Blaming it all on the White Tiger Temple, Yang Sanmu couldn't help but feel that the White Tiger Temple was responsible for these changes. In terms of actual strength, the White Tiger Temple didn't even have many Tier 6 emperors, and those they had were all puppets. It was just the prestige of the Qixin Temple that attracted so many strong individuals. "Elder, this way," said Elder Jujian, leading the two through the barrier. The scene before them became more vivid, and the mountain range seemed like the world Jian Wushuang had dreamt of. The air was filled with the songs of birds and the fragrance of flowers, resembling a fairyland. This was entirely different from what was recorded in the books. According to the writings, the northern region was mostly barbaric, but now it seemed quite the opposite. If this was considered barren, what about the original universe outside? On the journey alone, Jian Wushuang encountered many realms that were better than Yuanyang Lake. The only difference was that the cultivation conditions were not as good as those in Yuanyang Lake. Senior Yang, Taoist Wushuang, ahead is the tidal pavilion. The seats are already arranged. Please take your places, Elder Jujian said. Jian Wushuang looked ahead. The entire tidal pavilion was vast, and many people had already taken their seats. Thank you very much. Yang Sanmu, carrying his status, was not as proud as Jian Wushuang. He quickly expressed his gratitude. The seats were in the front row, right next to the position of the Xianxia Palace's master. Sitting beside him were all Tier 5 emperors. The Tao Lords didn't even have the qualification to sit in the front row. Even the young masters were in the second row. Jian Wushuang's seat was next to Yang Sanmu, the only Grand Yen Immortal in the front row. After taking their seats, many people looked over. Who is this person? He actually received personal reception from Elder Jujian. A Tao Lord is actually sitting in the front row. Many Tier 4 Emperor Immortals were in the second row, and those in the front row were either Tier 5 Emperor Immortals or some prestigious ones. The weakest were the Tier 4 Emperor Immortals, and now they were sitting side by side with a Tao Lord. Moreover, the seat where the Tao Lord was sitting was so close to the master of the Xianxia Palace. For a while it caused quite a stir. Although there were doubts, no one dared to confront them directly. After all, it was arranged by the Xianxia Palace and they were just guests. Tideview Pavilion. It observed the tide of swords, the ebb and flow of water, and the happenings under the heavens. Inside the present Tideview Pavilion, tens of thousands of emperors, along with some young talents at the Tao Lord level, gathered. They were disciples or heirs from various sects, destined to step into the emperor realm in the future. In ancient times, there existed a complete system of Tao cultivation. As long as one reached the Tao Lord level, they could almost certainly succeed in merging the Tao. However, there was no information about the ultimate Tao. Perhaps, as the old man with goat horns said, the postnatal and prenatal realms were fundamentally different. Not to mention, he not only grasped the ultimate Tao but also possessed an even more transcendent extreme Tao. One thing that piqued his curiosity was that many of these Tao Lords were half-step emperors, and even in the Shanxing Palace, there were beings comparable to emperors. These individuals did not follow the ultimate Tao, so how could their combat power be so terrifying? As they sat down, the discussions behind them ceased. Many emperors had just arrived from the city of Sheruo. Learning about the extraordinary identities of Jian Wushuang and others, and hearing about the events in Sheruo City, no one dared to speak recklessly. The divine temple in the 4 great secret realms was an inviolable existence. Anyone associated with the temple was undoubtedly no ordinary person. It was no wonder that the Xianxia Palace sent Elder Jujian to welcome them, being so courteous. The overall strength of Liuzhou was significant even in the northern region, as evidenced by the presence of the Heaven Temple of the White Tiger in this area, where the Venerable Lai Hua personally suppressed it. In Liuzhou alone, there were 5 Tier 6 experts. There were over 100 Tier 5 experts. Such a formidable force surpassed the entire original universe. If all the forces in the Qixin Temple were concentrated, they would be a significant power in the river of time and space. In the river of time and space, countless universes coexisted. Those who could step out of the universe were at least Tier 4 emperors, with some being Tier 3 or even Tier 6 emperors. However, most emperors from the outside world, while powerful in origin source, were weaker in terms of treasures. The strength of the Qixin Temple lay in its numerous legacies and treasures. However, its weakness was also apparent. The native powerhouses in the Qixin Temple were born from the Qixin's origin source. Qixin origin source may be stronger than the universe's origin source, but it was not the source that nurtured powerful beings. Therefore, in terms of origin source, the powerhouses born in the Qixin Temple were inherently weaker than those from the outside world. This is also what many emperors found strange about Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's current origin source aura was stronger than that of the average native emperor, but his cultivation and inheritance are significantly lacking, especially in terms of the divine body. In the 4 great secret realms, there are quite a few practitioners following the path of divine bodies. During their Tao Lord stage, they already possess 7,000 to 8,000 times the power of divine bodies. Once they successfully integrate their Deus, they have a divine body strength of tens of thousands. Moreover, there are secret methods for inheriting divine bodies that can be cultivated at the emperor level, further amplifying the divine body. With just a casual scan, Jian Wushuang identified many practitioners of the divine body among them. Their auras were distinctly different from others, especially a Tao Lord-level powerhouse not far behind him. His divine body reached 9,000 times, making him a formidable figure on the verge of integrating paths. With a slight movement of thought power, Jian Wushuang felt immense pressure. On the other side, there was another existence with a divine body surpassing 10,000 times. In Jian Wushuang's consciousness, that formidable figure was like a towering mountain, while he was just a sapling. Although he didn't know the exact multiple of their divine bodies, Jian Wushuang speculated that the opponent definitely had a divine body strength of at least 20,000 times. Otherwise, the pressure wouldn't be so overwhelming. Ancient sects are indeed extraordinary. Even the strongest special beings in the outside world only have a strength of 10,000 times. Even when reaching the emperor level, they probably won't be this powerful. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Comparisons are odious. In ancient times, there were things that Jian Wushuang envied, but if the indigenous powerhouses of the Qixin Temple knew how powerful the origin source outside was, they would also envy them. Various powerhouses exchanged toasts, each engaged in lively discussions. Jian Wushuang and the old man with sheep horns, however, found themselves at a loose end. Following the schedule, they could only observe the tide in the afternoon, and it was only at midnight when the moon was full that they could witness the sword tide. Jian Wushuang sat in his place, flipping through an ancient book called Northern Region Anecdotes, sipping wine and reading. The old man with sheep horns, being a powerhouse from ancient times, wasn't interested in such things and preferred to ignore others. He sat alone, eyes closed, in meditation. Seeing his appearance, others dared not approach him. In the first row, out of hundreds of seats, only half of the powerhouses were present, indicating that many prominent figures had yet to arrive. Jian Wushuang wasn't in a hurry. It was the rear rows that were nearly full. Among them was the frivolous young master Wei Liang. His status was extraordinary, but he only sat in the third row, alongside the Tier 3 Emperor Lord called Old Gar. What was somewhat surprising was that the one-armed middle-aged man with a broken sword, surnamed Nye, sat in the fifth row. The tide-viewing pavilion had a total of 5 rows. The first row consisted of prominent figures. The second row housed outstanding individuals from various sects, including some Tier 3 emperors and Tao lords with immense potential. The majority in the third row were like Wei Liang, each representing a sect as a young master, accompanied by Tier 3 Emperor Realm experts. In the fourth row, various independent cultivators sat, possessing ordinary Emperor Realm strength, sharing seats with some Tao lords. As for the fifth row, not even one emperor was present. Many were independent cultivator Dao lords. Xianxia Palace, renowned for its swordsmanship, annually extended special courtesy to independent cultivators proficient in the way of the sword. They invited powerful Dao lords to witness the sword tide, fostering good relations. In the future, when these cultivators reached the emperor realm, they could join Xianxia Palace as external disciples. Of course, it all depended on their strength. If among these independent cultivators, a Tier 6 emperor were to emerge, their kindness wouldn't be in vain. Humph. This guy has the nerve to come back. A Tier 5 powerhouse in golden sword robes sitting in the first row expressed anger, his tone icy. Jian Wushuang was relatively close, and he overheard it. In fact, the powerful individual deliberately spoke loudly, making sure those in the back rows could hear. Many turned their heads upon hearing the comment. It seemed that quite a few people recognized him. Jian Wushuang, feeling bored, decided to join in the fun and eavesdrop, attentively listening to the discussions around him. TSK, Nye Yuan dares to come to Xianxia Palace. Didn't he sever all ties with them? Someone remarked. Hee, you guys probably don't know. After the fall of that demoness, Nye Yuan's days in the Bailuo sect weren't easy. His strength plummeted, and the sect didn't treat him kindly. A son-in-law who came knocking on the door, and he even caused the death of the sect's holy maiden. What good treatment can he expect? A certain powerful figure in the first row, listening to the discussions behind, shook his head and sighed. Such is fate. Such a promising talent. What a pity! The Tier 5 emperor in the golden sword robe also showed a trace of regret in his eyes. But thinking of Nye Yuan's absurd actions, he snorted coldly. The one-armed man with a broken sword was once a sword cultivator of Xianxia Palace, dominating the Dao Lord realm in the northern region with unmatched talent. He was the top figure among the younger generation of Xianxia Palace, and after successfully merging with the Dao, he possessed the strength of a Tier 3 peak emperor. The Tier 4 emperor realm was just a step away. Initially, everyone believed he was the future pillar of Xianxia Palace, destined to reach the 5th tier emperor, and even Tier 6 was within his grasp. His origin source was exceptionally powerful, capable of slaying emperors even during his Dao Lord days. At the Tier 3 peak, he could suppress and defeat Tier 4 emperors effortlessly. His mastery of the sword was the myriad swords Dao, a peerless technique where one sword could unleash 1,000 killings, making him invincible among peers. Such a formidable cultivator ultimately ended up in such a state. Demoness? Holy Maiden? Bailuo sect. All of this seemed to be related to that woman. Nye Yuan. Jian Wushuang had seen him in Sharuo City, where his conspicuous broken sword caught the attention of a fellow sword cultivator. At that time, Nye Yuan appeared somewhat desolate, devoid of the aura of a sword cultivator, so Jian Wushuang didn't pay much attention. Little did he expect that Nye Yuan would face such tribulations. It was a pity. Swish! As Jian Wushuang turned his head, the old man with goat horns sat to his right. To the right of the old man was supposedly the position of the current owner of Xianxia Palace. However, the seat on his left had remained vacant. Now, a young man in a flowing sword robe smoothly took the seat. Jian Wushuang recognized him as Elder Zhujian, the one who had received them upon their arrival. Elder Zhujian was the youngest among the 9 current sword elders of Xianxia Palace, possessing immense potential and standing as a peak expert among Tier 5 emperors. Rumors had it that Elder Zhujian had the potential to become the sword sovereign in the future, inheriting the position of the Xianxia Palace master. If not for the unexpected visit of Jian Wushuang and the old man with goat horns, this person might have been next in line for the position of the Xianxia Palace owner. Elder Zhujian. Jian Wushuang immediately clasped his hands in salute, expressing gratitude for the warm reception. Friend Wushuang, there's no need for such courtesy. The fact that you and Senior Yang could come to Xianxia Palace is our good fortune. Elder Zhujian was modest and humble, a demeanor not commonly seen, even with someone of Jian Wushuang's background. Jian Wushuang didn't have much of a background. He was just an ordinary inheritor. His luck, however, shone brighter as he gained the favor of Shan Jun. Through a series of fortunate events, he accidentally created the 10th refinement of his physical body and acquired the Qixin Jade Tablet bestowed upon him by Jinling. Later on, he earned the appreciation of Wuxia, and accompanying him was the formidable Tier 5 Peak Emperor, the old man with goat horns, whose strength was unfathomable, and his collection of treasures was beyond imagination. Despite these reasons, Jian Wushuang never considered himself worthy of sitting alongside a Tier 5 Emperor, let alone a Tier 6 one. In the original universe, even a Tier 4 Emperor like Jin Wuyang was a towering figure, let alone individuals of this caliber. I observe, friend Wushuang, that you are also a swordsman, and your origin source is remarkably powerful. May I inquire about your lineage? Elder Zhujian asked. In truth, he had always been puzzled. Jian Wushuang's origin source was elusive to him, but the emanating aura indicated emperor-level strength, even though Jian Wushuang's cultivation level was only at 9 revolutions. It was a perplexing situation. Furthermore, the palace master had warned him to be cautious in hosting these two guests, not only because of the presence of the esteemed Lai Hua. In Liuzhou, although venerable Lai Hua was domineering, it hadn't reached the point of suppressing them. The patriarch of Xianxia, with strength comparable to the venerable Lai Hua and even slightly stronger, had no reason to be so cautious just because of a word from venerable Lai Hua. He also took this opportunity to probe and explore Jian Wushuang's details. When Jian Wushuang heard the inquiry from Elder Zhujian, for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He couldn't just say that he came from another universe. At the moment of his hesitation, the old man with sheep horns raised his eyebrows and transmitted to him, "Tell him you're from the Grave God Mountain." Grave God Mountain? Where is that? He didn't have time to think about it in detail and answered, "One come from the Grave God Mountain in the God's Tomb Secret Realm." Jian Wushuang's voice wasn't too loud, but everyone present, each with keen senses, heard the 3 words Grave God Mountain. Grave God Mountain. Elder Zhujian suppressed the shocked expression on his face. Among the 4 great secret realms, it was said that the Heaven Realm was the leader, but in terms of top-notch strength, the God's Tomb Secret Realm was undoubtedly the strongest. Legend has it that the 4 great secret realms were all built around Grave God Mountain, where a divine master slept, the god of creation, and the White Tiger Temple was the guard of that divine master. There were also the legendary guardians, each of whom possessed immense strength, capable of killing even Tier 6 Emperor in existence. Many emperors knew these legends, especially about Grave God Mountain, a place more formidable than the temple. Countless people once rushed to the God's Tomb Secret Realm, wanting to explore Grave God Mountain. Unfortunately, to this day, no one has been able to reach Grave God Mountain. Most of them fell midway, whether they were Tier 5 or Tier 6 emperors, not a single survivor emerged. Jian Wushuang observed their shocked expressions and then turned to the old man with the goat horns. "So, that's how it is. You, as inheritors, will eventually enter the 4 great secret realms and go to the Grave God Mountain. Afterwards, you'll settle in the Elder Palace of the White Tiger Temple. However, in terms of status, you are considered to originate from the Grave God Mountain," explained the old man with goat horns. Jian Wushuang communicated through telepathy, asking, "Senior, what exactly is on the Grave God Mountain? Is it truly the place where Qixin attained enlightenment?" The old man with goat horns simply shook his head silently. He truly did not know. Perhaps only the masters of the 4 temples would be aware of the hidden details. These individuals were the core of the Qixin Temple. Although Jinling was in control, it was a later evolution. In the past, many matters were entrusted to the 4 temples by the Qixin, and this was why the 4 temples dared to challenge Jinling. However, now the authority of the 4 temples had begun to decline, and Jinling was the sole controller. Elder Zhujian initially thought that Jian Wushuang might be a descendant of a senior figure within the White Tiger Temple. He never expected that he hailed from the mysterious Grave God Mountain. For a moment, Elder Zhujian became more reserved and humble, not daring to display even a hint of arrogance. Other emperors, when looking at Jian Wushuang, showed a tinge of envy in their eyes. No wonder that Tao Lord was so formidable, able to command such respect from Xianxia Palace. It turned out he came from the enigmatic Grave God Mountain. These people soon calmed down. Over the years, the information about the Grave God Mountain had become more widespread. Many powerful beings had emerged from the god's tomb and entered the secret realms of the heavenly realm. However, those beings were all formidable, possessing special elf forces, and were among the most elite among the Tier 6 emperors. People held a certain fear and concern for those from the god's tomb secret realm, especially those from the Grave God Mountain. In the last row, Yuan, upon hearing the 3 words Grave God Mountain, had a sudden change in his expression and immediately stood up. Grave God Mountain. He, too, had been a direct disciple of an ancient sect like Xianxia Palace and naturally knew about the Grave God Mountain. Regarding the mysteries on Grave God Mountain, he wasn't interested. But there was one legend among them that he had been trying to verify. That was the reversal of time, the resurrection of those who had already fallen. Swish! With a single step, Yuan, the one-armed man, walked directly towards Jian Wushuang. The old man with goat horns immediately sensed a threatening intent and, as the unfamiliar emperor rushed towards Jian Wushuang, his aura surged, blocking the intruder. Boom! Yuan's aura was somewhat chaotic and anxious, lacking murderous intent. That's why the old man with goat horns didn't kill him on the spot but instead punished him slightly, directly suppressing him to his knees. A Tier 4 emperor disguised as a Tier 3, the old man with goat horns clenched his fist in the void, forcing Yuan to kneel. Jian Wushuang remained calm, slowly rising. He was a bit confused. Did he know this one-armed man? They only had a brief encounter, so why did he suddenly rush towards him? Was it because of Grave God Mountain? Elder Zhujian stood on the side, looking somewhat embarrassed. His reaction wasn't as quick as the old man with goat horns. Although both were peak emperors, there was still a slight gap. However, he never expected someone here would dare to be so bold as to disturb the distinguished guests of Xianxia Palace. Yuan, you have quite the audacity. Disturbing the distinguished guests of Xianxia Palace. You better apologize immediately. Although Elder Zhujian's tone was cold, he made it clear that an apology could resolve the matter. Speaking of which, he was Yuan's martial uncle. Initially, he was the top figure of their generation, and Yuan succeeded him later. At that time, he was so delighted to have an outstanding junior, believing that the future of Xianxia Palace would become even more powerful. But what he didn't expect was that such a dazzling genius, in the end, severed ties with Xianxia Palace because of a demoness and married into the Bailuo sect. A small sect that not even a Tier 6 Immortal could match. Not only did it bring shame to Xianxia Palace, but it also wasted such a promising sword cultivator. Yuan's eye sockets sank, and he looked desolate. Once, he stood above all with his sword, never bowing his head. But at this moment, he was willing to bow, only for the woman in his heart. Jian Wushuang knew the other party meant no harm, so he pressed down his hand and spoke. Senior Yang, forget it. I can see that this fellow cultivator has no ill intentions. Don't forget to thank fellow Taoist Wushuang, Elder Zhujian said coldly. Thank you, fellow Taoist. I was a bit impulsive just now. No problem. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. In his opinion, this was not a big deal, and he was a bit startled by Elder Yang's reaction. From his perspective, there was really no need for such a commotion. Little did he know that Jinling had explicitly instructed that he must be sent intact to the original realm. Moreover, Wuxia had entrusted him to Elder Yang for care, and if anything went wrong, Elder Yang would be held responsible. While Elder Yang, as a senior figure, could withstand Wuxia's anger, he had no face at all in front of Jinling. Humph, next time, it won't be so easy to talk. Elder Yang put away his palm, and his aura converged. Yuan wiped away the bloodstains from the corner of his mouth and stood up. This fellow Taoist, may I ask you a question? After standing up, Yuan unexpectedly asked such an absurd question. This made everyone else gasp in surprise. Just now, they probably didn't kill him because of Xianxia Palace. Even if he was expelled from Xianxia Palace, no matter how you looked at it, he was still a member of Xianxia Palace, the leader of the previous generation. Killing him in public just for a clash was indeed unreasonable. However, it was a bit exaggerated now. He dared to take advantage and ask such a question. Before Jian Wushuang and the old man with goat horns could answer, Elder Jujian was furious, shouting, "Arrogant!" The gaze of the old man with goat horns also turned cold, and for a moment, the situation became tense. Jian Wushuang, standing in the middle, didn't know how to respond for a moment. He didn't know what Nie Yuan wanted to ask, and even if he asked, he might not know the answer. Taoist Wushuang, I apologize for this, but you can rest assured. I will personally drive this person away. Elder Jujian took a step forward, ready to take action. However, Jian Wushuang raised his hand to stop him and calmly said, "No need, this fellow Taoist. Just go ahead and ask whatever you want." Nie Yuan was overjoyed and quickly asked, "On the Grave God Mountain, is it really possible to reverse time and space and resurrect the dead?" Before Jian Wushuang could answer, the old man with goat horns beside him spoke first. "Yes, but you need to have the strength to go up." "Yes," Jian Wushuang echoed. To be honest, he didn't know. But since the old man with the goat horns spoke, he followed suit. Reversing time and space. It seems to be for the resurrection of a fellow cultivator. Devotion. After understanding the other's intentions, Jian Wushuang felt a certain admiration. When Nie Yuan heard that he wanted answers, his entire demeanor changed. The previously despondent aura faded, replaced by a completely new momentum erupting from him. Tear for Emperor. At this moment, the others finally reacted. Nie Yuan had already reached Tier 4, and at this moment he directly exposed the aura of the peak of Tier 4. Senior Nie. The young girl sitting in the back row, looking at her senior who had always been melancholic, now radiating a renewed vigor, felt genuinely happy for him. After taking his seat again, Elder Jujian continued discussing the past of Flowing Province with Jian Wushuang, and Jian Wushuang found it quite interesting. However, secretly, he communicated with the old man with the goat horns. "Senior, is it true that time and space can be reversed? Why? Do you also have a fellow cultivator to resurrect?" Jian Wushuang smiled awkwardly, and then said, No, I'm just curious about reversing time and space. As far as I know, the space source is common, it's the origin source practiced by Emperor, but what about the time origin source? Why have I never seen relevant records? You kid know quite a bit. The space origin source is related to the Emperor's realm. Once mastered, it enters another realm, and in that realm one cultivates the time origin source. With your current strength, there's no need to know about the time origin source. Wait until you reach the Tier 6 Emperor before asking. The old man with the goat horns smiled slightly. In fact, he didn't know much about the space origin source, let alone time. That was something the Divine Masters were concerned with. However, Jian Wushuang was not satisfied and continued to ask, "Senior, if it's true that time can be reversed on Grave God Mountain, why did you tell Nyeon? Could it be because of some resonance?" After saying this, he looked at the old man with the goat horns with a slightly strange expression. What nonsense are you guessing? I just felt sorry for him and gave him a thought. But if he really has the strength to go up Grave God Mountain, there is indeed hope to resurrect his fellow cultivator. But in my opinion, it's difficult. The Tier 6 Emperor is just the threshold. The old man with the goat horns commented. The Tier 6 Emperor is the threshold. Jian Wushuang wasn't too surprised by this. After all, many Tier 6 Emperors who entered the Divine Tomb had fallen, and the location of Grave God Mountain had not been found. The 4 great secret realms varied in size, and the God's Tomb, visible to the naked eye, was much larger than the other 3 secret realms combined. Even with the speed of a Tier 6 Emperor without teleportation arrays, finding the Grave God Mountain was not a simple task. Many had perished midway without locating the Grave God Mountain. Jian Wushuang was quite familiar with Yang Sanmu, who was seemingly tough but soft-hearted. On the surface, he appeared to have the heart to kill Nie Yuan, but in reality, he gave the latter hope, allowing him to have a renewed pursuit. Without exchanging words, Jian Wushuang and Elder Jujian enjoyed their conversation. "Dao Friend Wushuang, if you hold me in esteem, just call me Dao Friend. The title Elder is but an empty formality." Elder Jujian raised his wine cup and drank it down. Jian Wushuang was also a straightforward person. He quickly finished his drink, and the two were on the verge of kneeling down to become sworn brothers. Dao friend Wushuang, take a look. The tide is rising. Elder Zhujian put down his cup and pointed to the lake. Indeed, a ripple containing the essence of heaven and earth gradually rose, shining alongside the sun and moon. Buzz! The sound of horns resonated, marking the official beginning of the tide viewing pavilion. The tide started from the foot of the mountain, extending all the way to the tide viewing pavilion on the mountainside. The scene was spectacular. Upon witnessing this, Jian Wushuang's expression changed slightly. Elder Zhujian thought it was because Jian Wushuang had never seen such a scene and was impressed. He felt a sense of pride in his heart. Even those who came from the Grave God Mountain were amazed. After entering the Xianxia Palace, their reputation would surely rise to a new level. Previously known only in the northern region, they would undoubtedly become a super sect, gaining fame throughout the 4 great secret realms. Jian Wushuang was taken aback, not because of the grand spectacle before him, but rather due to the rolling tide's connection to the origin he had absorbed outside Qiuhuang City. According to Qiuhuang, that origin belonged to a female sword immortal who left it behind after shattering Qiuhuang City with a single stroke. From the essence of that sword immortal, Jian Wushuang had witnessed the scene of that decisive strike. A scene remarkably similar to the current tidal surge. Sword chi surged, sweeping across the heavens and the earth. The image of that moment was etched in his memory forever. Could it be that the sword immortal has a connection to Xianxia Palace? Jian Wushuang immediately contacted the old man with sheep horns through a mind transmission, inquiring about the female sword immortal who devastated Kunuang City. Are you talking about Yun Jianxian? She belongs to the oldest group of powerful individuals, terrifyingly strong and can be considered the number 1 under the Divine Masters. I haven't had much interaction with her. I don't know much. The old man with goat horns responded with some surprise at Jian Wushuang's inquiry about Yun Jianxian. Could it be that this youngster has inherited the legacy of Yun Jianxian? That possibility existed. When he entered the Qixin Temple, the entire Qixin lineage began to decline. The creation of the 4 temples and the construction of the Qixin Temple itself. Yun Jianxian, once glorious, was undoubtedly the strongest among the emperors under the Qixin's command. Her life was marked by warfare, a cool and solitary demeanor, never forming alliances. The only relatively close relationship she had was with a puppet created by the Qixin, namely Lord Zhuyi. Before her fall, she bestowed her entire life's collection to Lord Zhuyi. Jian Wushuang indeed had the chance of inheriting Yun Jianxian's legacy. Yun Jianxian. Jian Wushuang deeply engraved that name into his memory. As the tide viewing pavilion commenced, the mistress of Xianxia Palace made a personal appearance. Many people stood up respectfully to pay their respects. As the current sword sovereign, her strength might not have been among the absolute top, but her reputation was exceptionally high, even surpassing the Xianxia patriarch. She treated the wandering cultivators exceptionally well, and as a result, Xianxia Palace's reputation was extremely high among them. Especially for sword cultivators, Xianxia Palace provided them with the opportunity to observe the tides, which was a great favor. Everyone, the tide watching is starting. No need to be constrained. Please take your seats. The palace master of Xianxia, dressed in a simple green robe with only a simple wooden hairpin holding his hair, was very plain. On his table, there was only a teapot, no alcoholic drinks or fruits. Once again, everyone took their seats and began watching the tide, seeking enlightenment in the way of the sword. The old man with sheep horns and the palace master of Xianxia sat next to each other, chatting casually. It seemed they didn't know each other. They talked about matters related to the Lai Hua Venerable or perhaps discussed things about the Elder Palace. The other person was a Tier 6 emperor and the head of a sect, acclaimed as the sword sovereign of the world. Though the old man with goat horns held a high status, he didn't dare to be disrespectful. The tide gradually rose, and the sword intent within it became more intense. This lake, where swords were washed year-round, had cleaned countless divine swords. The contained sword intent was extremely complex, allowing one to only comprehend a fraction of it. Jian Wushuang watched carefully but found it challenging to start. In the end, he could only draw inspiration from one aspect and not linger too long. He cultivated the ultimate sword Dao, seeking purity. The diverse sword intent in the lake didn't suit him. He could only draw inspiration from a part of it and not delve too deeply. The tide continued for an hour, finally reaching the mountainside. The sword intent was now at its peak, and many sword cultivators broke through, especially the Dao Lords, among whom quite a few achieved breakthroughs. Many people came here because they faced bottlenecks and wanted to utilize the insights from the tide to break through their own origins. Especially the wandering cultivators. Their numbers among the breakthroughs were the highest. The young girl sitting in the last row, Qing Luo, had a glint in her eyes. She had also broken through, successfully reaching the 8th layer of the origin source, stepping into the 9th layer, achieving perfection. Her combat strength naturally skyrocketed. Wei Liang, the young master, was sweating profusely at this moment. Old Go, standing by his side, had been guarding the surroundings and setting up barriers for him. But unfortunately, he still couldn't make the breakthrough. Damn it, just a little bit more. Once I break through the origin source, I can completely perfect my cultivation and return to unify the Tao. Wei Liang felt somewhat unwilling. The sweat on his forehead evaporated, and his face looked unpleasant. Old Gu, on the side, fearing changes in his state of mind, consoled him, "Young master, there's still the sword tide. Don't be disheartened. The sword intent contained in the tide wasn't much, and it was too chaotic. When the Xianxia Palace was established, this lake was just a small spring. The ancestor of the Xianxia Palace once washed his sword here, and later, after attaining Dao, he cultivated and developed this place. The sword cultivators in the Xianxia Palace developed a habit of washing their swords here. From ancient times to the present, countless epochs had passed. The swords washed here could fill this entire lake. It was through sword washing that the tide viewing pavilion was established. As for the sword tide, all disciples of the Xianxia Palace released their origin power, controlled their swords to break through the air from the mountaintop to the mountain bottom. Even the Xianxia ancestor would release a strand of golden sword, following the sword tide. This was the most meaningful event within the Xianxia Palace, held once every epoch. It served two purposes: attracting the geniuses of the northern region to witness the sword tide and publicizing the strength of the Xianxia Palace. It was a means of displaying their power. And precisely because of this, every year, numerous sword cultivators would rack their brains to enter the Xianxia Palace. As midnight approached, the temperature in the entire northern region suddenly dropped. The crescent moon hung high, and a strand of golden sword light lit up from the mountain top. It's the sword resonance," Jian Wushuang whispered. The cold wind was fierce, the golden sword light shining brilliantly, competing with the sun and moon. At the moment when the sword resonance occurred, the entire mountaintop illuminated. Numerous swords radiating light soared into the sky, accompanied by a golden sword. On the side, Elder Jujian and even the Xianxia Palace Master raised their hands, and a burst of sword energy surged towards the mountaintop. In no time, 99,000 swords from the Xianxia Palace gathered on the mountaintop. The condensed sword energy transformed into tidal waves, sweeping down from the mountaintop. Even Jian Wushuang, who had seen much in his cultivation journey, couldn't help but feel his mind shake at the sight. He couldn't resist the urge to dive into the sword tide. Gazing at the sword tide, various sword Dao origin sources emerged, and Jian Wushuang carefully pondered, seeking to gain some insights. The entire sword tide lasted for an hour, a short time but of extraordinary significance, assisting the visiting sword cultivators and showcasing the power of the Xianxia Palace. Indeed, it was formidable. In those sword lights, Jian Wushuang could discern at least 19 swords, representing the Tier 5 Emperor's origin source. Judging by the intensity, these could likely rival the origin sources of Tier 4 Emperors in the outside world. Tier 6 Emperors, only 2 swords, belonging to the Xianxia Palace Master and the Xianxia Patriarch's sword Dao origin source. Tier 4 Emperors were more numerous, numbering in the hundreds. Tier 3 Emperors exceeded 1,000. a sect comparable to a universe. While marveling at the depth of the Qixin Temple's heritage, Jian Wushuang also felt a sense of sorrow. The origin sources of these cultivators all had flaws, too weak. Compared to the emperors in the outside world, they lagged behind by a level. In terms of combat power, they might only be half as inferior, but the upper limit was considerably lower. No wonder the importance of an ultimate emperor surpassed the combined strength of the native practitioners of the 4 great secret realms. If that ultimate emperor reached Tier 6, one person could probably slaughter the entire 4 great secret realms. Even the special life forms in God's tomb would be unable to stop them. This was the true might of the ultimate power. As the sword tide concluded, Jian Wushuang stood up, feeling somewhat unsatisfied. In terms of origin source, he didn't need references, but in terms of sword intent, he still had much to learn. Friend Jian Wushuang, are you interested in participating in a sparring match after the sword tide? Elder Zhujian inquired. Sparring match. The sword tide event at the Xianxia Palace concluded, setting up 13 platforms on the lake. The current 13 Taie sword successors of the Xianxia Palace would personally guard these platforms. Those who could become Taie sword successors at the Xianxia Palace were not ordinary individuals. Their strengths rivaled emperors. The leader among the 13 had even achieved victories against emperors. Ah, then I look forward to it, Jian Wushuang replied. He was not in a hurry. Although there were only 2 days, 1 day had already passed. Battles among the powerful were fleeting, and he would wait for the right moment to make his move. After receiving nods from the Xianxia Palace Master and some elders, Elder Zhujian personally stood up to preside over the event. Everyone, here are 13 golden swords. Each sword carries the original essence of swordsmanship left by our Xianxia ancestor. Whoever can claim a platform will be awarded a golden sword. After Elder Zhujian spoke, he tossed the 13 golden swords into the air, suspending them above the lake. Golden swords. Many sword cultivators gazed eagerly at those golden swords. The origin source sword Dao of the Xianxia Patriarch. If one could obtain one, careful contemplation would bring endless benefits. Even if they didn't use the golden sword themselves, they could exchange it for countless treasures to enhance their own cultivation. There was once a wandering cultivator who obtained a golden sword, and he was specially invited by the Xianxia Palace to become a core disciple, equivalent in status to the 13 Taie swords. A Dao lord from a small sect also won a golden sword and auctioned it off on the spot, selling it for a sky-high price of 100,000 divine stones. 100,000 divine stones were comparable to the wealth of some emperors. The crowd held their breath, awaiting the descent of the golden sword. Many Dao lords were rubbing their hands in anticipation, ready for a challenge. At this moment, 13 platforms rose from the surface of the lake, each with a sword-wielding figure standing atop, both male and female. These individuals were disciples of the Taie sword. The Taie sword was not created by the founding ancestor of the Xianxia Palace, but was established by a disciple of the founding ancestor. The disciple who created the Taie sword achieved this extraordinary skill when he was a Tier 4 emperor. It allowed Dao lords to fully unleash their strength and even possessed the ability to amplify their origin source. Unfortunately, he passed away at a young age, having just reached Tier 4 emperor. The founding ancestor, enraged by this, wielded a sword with chilling brilliance, shaking the entire northern region. Overnight, he annihilated 16 emperors involved in the matter, 4 of whom were Tier 5 emperors. These emperors were no ordinary individuals. Each had a backing sect. However, not a single sect dared to intervene on their behalf. They were left without anyone to claim their bodies. The Xianxia ancestor's actions during this incident earned him a formidable reputation in the celestial realms. Taishu sect, Han Wuxing challenges the 7th Tai Ta sword. Whoosh! A Dao lord from the 3rd row soared into the air and landed directly on the 7th platform. His strength was only at the level of a half-step emperor, making it challenging for him to seize the golden sword. Simultaneously, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Dao lords stepped forward, instantly occupying 13 platforms with their formidable presence. The weakest among them were peak-level Dao lords. Jian Wushuang swept a glance, identifying the strongest among the 13. There was little hope of seizing the golden sword. The sword Dao of a Tier 6 Emperor's origin source. Such an opportunity greatly stirred him. The 13 Taiye swords of the Xianxia Palace were all formidable, yet their origin sources were somewhat weaker. In terms of strength, the intensity of their origin source was on par with the Dao Lords of the original universe. In terms of combat prowess, they rivaled the indigenous emperors but fell short compared to those from the outside. On the whole, they were a half-step weaker than the external powerhouses. The half-step emperors here might only possess the combat strength of the Dao Lords from the original universe. To match an emperor's strength, there could be half-step emperors, and those capable of defeating emperors would possess strengths comparable to emperors. That seemed to be the general idea. However, without the opportunity presented by the Qixin Temple, it was likely that the Grand Yen Immortals of the original universe, at their peak, would only be on par with the emperors and could contend with the local geniuses. But this was just one ancient sect. The 4 great secret realms were vast, and the talents of this sect were only a fraction of what the original universe possessed in terms of quality. Now, with the opportunity provided by the Qixin Temple, things were uncertain. Just looking at the Grand Yen Immortals he encountered, Wan Xing, Hu Qing, Ji Chaoyang, and even himself were much stronger than those 13 Taiye swords. Ji Chaoyang, with his 9 revolutions, had the combat power of a Dao Lord and could directly match an emperor when perfected. In the 4 great secret realms, he had the strength to slay ordinary emperors. Even the current Jian Wushuang, without having completed the 9 revolutions, could reach the point of slaying native emperors. Of the 13 Taiye swords, he was confident in defeating all except the sword leader. The strength of the sword leader was elusive. That guy's divine body was powerful, undoubtedly surpassing his own. But it was uncertain if it had reached a level thousands of times greater. The origin source was mediocre, only an ordinary second-grade origin source. In the showdown, the 13 individuals were defeated quickly. If it weren't for sparing some face for these young masters, they would likely be defeated almost instantly. The people present paid little attention. The defeat of these 13 was also within expectations. It would be strange if anyone had won. The disciples of Xianxia Palace were not so easily defeated. In the ceremonial sword-fighting event after each tide-watching, only 1 or 2 could successfully seize the sword. In the case of the generation of Nie Yuan, the Taiye sword had achieved an unbeaten record in 7 consecutive tide-watching ceremonies. Eventually, it attracted the superlative disciples from the ancient land of Central Province, engaging in a breathtaking battle with Nie Yuan. In the end, it resulted in a draw. Out of respect for the opponent's prestigious identity, the golden sword was handed over to him. Jian Wushuang had already stood up, positioned at the railing, scanning the disciples on the arena who wielded the Taiye sword. Although there was a significant gap in origin source compared to him, Jian Wushuang had never encountered many ancient sword techniques. It was an opportunity to observe and learn. The intricacies were subtle, but unfortunately, the practitioner's origin source was too weak to fully unleash the techniques. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed with enthusiasm, thinking to himself, "Indeed, they are disciples of ancient sects." The Taiye sword was truly a rare and supreme sword technique. It was highly suitable for Dao Lords to cultivate. With the origin source of these individuals, achieving Dao Lord status would be extremely challenging in the outside world. Still, by practicing the Taiye sword, they could become formidable. The sword Dao reaches perfection, merging into the unity of the primordial Yuan. Each sword embodies incredibly potent sword intent, far surpassing any sword intent he has ever encountered. This is the essence of a practitioner of the sword path. Person and sword, heart and sword, form transcending even the sword itself. Unfortunately, there are some flaws in the origin source. Although the Qixin Temple's origin source is formidable, even surpassing that of the original universe, it is ultimately too complex. Not suitable for the sword path. If it were the myriad Daos, it would be highly sought after in the 4 great secret realms. Regrettably, he has yet to come across relevant records. The first round, Taiye sword emerges victorious, declared Elder Jujin loudly. All 13 challengers were injured, Either they conceded voluntarily or were knocked off the stage. Upon returning to their positions, the Xianxia Palace would provide godstones to help them recover. This policy actually encouraged more people to take on the challenge. Of course, ordinary Dao lords wouldn't embarrass themselves by stepping onto the stage. Soon, after more than a dozen rounds of challenges, formidable contenders began to appear. Tianma sect, Zhu Bachi, challenges the 13th sword. The newcomer's voice resounded like a bell, his physique bulky, with a face full of rough muscles. A member of the demonic sect. Niani trembled at the mention of the Tianma sect. It was a super sect rivaling the Xianxia Palace, ranked among the top 3 demonic sects in the northern region. Zhu Bachi was a powerful disciple of the contemporary Tianma sect, destined to become a demonic giant in the future. Judging by his physique, ordinary people wouldn't easily discern his cultivation in the sword Dao. Boom! Advancing from the second row, Zhu Bachi's massive figure, with a perfected physical body and a divine form exceeding 8,000 times, approached. Only the sword Dao's origin source seemed slightly weaker. Jian Wushuang's gaze deepened. This person indeed had the qualifications to challenge the 13th Tai sword, and he was challenging the weakest among them. This surprised him. Even he couldn't see through it thoroughly. Except for the leader, the auras of the other 12 swords were identical. It was challenging for individuals of the same level to discern each other's origin source. Not everyone possessed thought power as formidable as his. His gaze shifted towards a young man with white hair, similar to himself. It became clear to him. The Tier 5 demonic path emperor had communicated with Zhu Bachi through telepathy, informing him about the weakest challenger. After several rounds of challenges, the 13 Tai Pia swords had inadvertently revealed some of their strengths. The discerning eyes of an emperor could easily distinguish the strong from the weak, even in a lake filled with sword intent and origin sources. The emperor's mastery over spatial origin sources allowed him to unravel the intricate sword intents and see their essence. Zhu Bachi's appearance prompted many to step forward. After all, it was a peak-level battle between equals. In this round, besides the formidable demon cultivator, there was also a grand Yen Immortal who rivaled an emperor. However, not many paid attention to the latter's background. Apart from these two, the rest were all half-step emperors. Qiuhuang City's interest in these battles was minimal. Qiuhuang casually chatted with the Xianxia Palace's master about matters concerning the Elder Palace, then closed his eyes to rest, projecting an air of detachment. However, in secret, he continued to telepathically communicate with Jian Wushuang. "Kid, you can endure this? That's the Sword Dao origin source of the Xianxia Patriarch. Aren't you afraid someone else might snatch it?" Before Jian Wushuang didn't turn around, still fixated on the 13 Tai swords. Silently, he transmitted his thoughts. "Let's wait a bit longer. The Sword Dao origin source is unique. Obtaining even a strand is sufficient. No need to attract unnecessary attention." He wasn't sure, but among these 13 strands of golden sword chi, there seemed to be a different origin source of Sword Dao. TSK. If I tell you that these 13 strands of Sword Dao origin source are different, would you be ready to bow out right now? Different. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow. Sword Dao was supposed to be singular, the purest form of the martial path focused on killing and combat. How could it be different? Indeed, it's different. Xianxia ancestor followed the Dao of the myriad swords, similar to the myriad Dao schools, not inferior to the ultimate Dao. Myriad swords. Jian Wushuang was somewhat astonished. Could Sword Dao be cultivated in such diverse ways? How do you know? Jian Wushuang transmitted his curious tone. The old man with goat horns snorted and continued. "Do you think the Elder Palace is just idling around? Even if they're unfamiliar with these ancient sects, would they still be unfamiliar with these powerful Tier 6 emperors? Ordinary Tier 6 was one thing, but the current head of the Xianxia Palace was quite mediocre in strength. When he was a Tier 5 emperor, he only mastered the tail end of the 9 swords. It was only after breaking through to the Tier 6 that he ascended to the position of the palace head. He was not even considered during the initial planning, and no one expected him to sneakily reach the Tier 6. Even the Xianxia ancestor was shocked at the time. Although his combat strength wasn't formidable, he was still a Tier 6 emperor, on par with the peak of the Tier 5, the goat-horned old man. For those truly top-notch Tier 6 emperors, the Elder Palace had been studying them since its inception. After all, whether to recruit or suppress, one must be tactful in one's heart. The 4 great secret realms will eventually be integrated and unified to restore the ancient glory. The current scattered state is worthless. Instead, it's a burden. If the White Tiger Temple can't suppress it, the Elder Palace will have to take action. In the Elder Palace, there are several formidable Tier 6 emperor among them, no weaker than the White Tiger Temple. Just like Wuxia, once a named disciple of the Qixin Temple, the power of his inheritance is probably beyond their imagination. Otherwise, during the initial exploration, they might have died in the land realm. Compared to the land realm, the heavenly realm is much more stable. At least those Tier 6 emperors are quite honest. They won't easily provoke the White Tiger Temple. Kid, you don't have much time left. Take the opportunity to gain some benefits. Maybe when you make a move, the Xianxia Palace, seeing your strength, will give you some treasures. Jian Wushuang looked surprised and communicated through voice transmission. Is it possible? As a Grand Yen Immortal, I shouldn't be treated like this by the Xianxia Patriarch, right? Humph, you don't understand. Even if the Xianxia Patriarch doesn't value you, the current Palace Master of Xianxia Palace will give you some benefits to establish a connection with you. Thinking about it, it made sense. In the future, for inheritors like them, their status would be quite high after settling in the 4 great secret realms. They were destined to become the elite, and it was only natural for these native emperors to establish some connections with them. From the old man with goat horns, he also learned a lot of confidential information. For example, in the future, after they were registered in the Grave God Mountain, they would later move to the heavenly realm, joining either the White Tiger Temple or the Elder Palace. With unlimited potential in the future as the first group of inheritors, there would be countless more to come. In their perspective, time was infinite. In no time, the entire 4 great secret realms would be under their control. Even taking over the Qixin Temple in the future wouldn't be a problem. Otherwise, why would the Qixin Temple recruit so many inheritors? To confine them? That was impossible. There must be a purpose behind it. The old man with goat horns had lived for who knows how long, seen all sorts of things. He understood such matters the best. Back then, many big shots had privately given him a lot of benefits, asking him to forge various treasures to consolidate their power. It was a kind of early investment. Kid, don't overestimate those powerhouses, but also, don't underestimate them, the old man with horns advised. Jian Wushuang nodded in agreement. Tier 6 experts, though formidable, had their own needs. Qixin Temple belonged to Jinling, and as an heir, one would inevitably come into contact with its core layers sooner or later. Giving benefits to this inheritor now amounted to little. Moreover, a Tier 6 emperor wouldn't make a small move. Casually presenting some good items would bring immense benefits to this Grand Yen Immortal. This place was the heavenly secret realm, preserving the ancient brilliance. Profound arts, secret techniques, precious treasures. There were plenty. Especially the unparalleled arts within Xianxia Palace. The Taiye sword particularly caught his eye. The 13 Taiye swords transmitted in with such strength had a significant connection with the Taiye supreme techniques. This time, the appearance of the young master of the Tianma sect drew Jian Wushuang's particular attention. The battles of such experts were the true test of the Taiye sword's might. Dong! The space broke at dawn. A stream of light streaked across, and the 13 challengers each landed on their respective arenas. Zhu Bachi twisted his chubby body and landed on the 13th arena. I've heard about it early on, the 13th swordsman. Tai A's Zhuifeng Jian is especially fierce. Today, I'll come to learn. The 13th swordman, Zhuifeng, his sword was indeed very powerful, but his weakness lay in his divine body and flesh being too weak. Despite having innate treasures like armor, defense remained his greatest vulnerability. His swordsmanship was often sharp, pushing himself into dire straits each time. Fortunately, his speed was extremely agile. Before the opponent touched his body, they were defeated. Zhuifeng's sword, without wasting words, A streak of light cut through space. His narrow-bladed long sword was drawn in an instant, slashing towards Zhubachi. Humph! Zhubachi stood still, not moving a muscle. As the sword strike rushed towards him, demonic flames soared, and a bladeless heavy sword suddenly appeared, directly blocking Zhuofeng's sword strike. Clang! The attack was blocked, and Zhuofeng quickly retracted, creating distance. Zhubachi's name was known to him. Although the bladeless heavy sword was powerful, it was also too cumbersome. As long as he kept harassing Zhubachi without stopping, he would naturally force the opponent to reveal a flaw. At that moment, a single strike could break through the defense and defeat Zhubachi. Zhubachi understood this strategy and had prepared for it before stepping onto the stage. To external observers, the arena seemed to be a square with a size of only a few dozen miles in length and width, but internally, it was a small world with infinite dimensions. It was a treasure in the hands of the organizers and did not limit the performance of cultivators. Is running all you can do? Facing the repeated sneak attacks of the Zhuofeng, Zhubachi remained unmoved, skillfully blocking each attempt. Zhuofeng raised an eyebrow. The strength of this giant from the Tianma sect was indeed surprising. Going on like this, the hope of defeating him seemed extremely faint. The giant's strength is indeed remarkable. I underestimated him, said Zhuofeng, moving like the wind, ethereal as ever. On the tide-viewing pavilion, many Dao lords sweated in their palms, clearly focused on the battle unfolding on the 13th platform. The fights on the other platforms had already lost their vigor at this point, while the clash on the 13th platform was just beginning. Jian Wushuang felt an itch in his hands as he watched. The emperor from the demonic sect wore a confident smile, seemingly sure about the outcome of this battle. Brother Zhu Jian, between these two juniors, who do you think has a better chance of winning? Elder Zhu Jian, standing at the forefront, furrowed his brows. It seemed this formidable figure from the demonic sect came prepared. Before he could respond, the chief elder in front of Zhu Jian spoke up. As the current master of the 13th Tai sword, this junior was his named disciple. Once he succeeded in combining the Dao, he would become his direct disciple. Therefore, he had to say something now. Taoist Lu Yang, there's no need to overly concern ourselves with victory or defeat in the competition between juniors. Everything is for the sake of mutual improvement. Lu Yang, the powerhouse from the Tianma sect with pitch-black eyes, turned to the chief elder of the 9 swords with a sinister tone. Elder, that's not entirely true. Junior competitions reveal the future of the sections. Good. Since that's the case, let's spice things up a bit. Let these 2 juniors show us who is stronger and who is the ultimate victor. The chief elder had been waiting for this. He immediately made the decision. They were not here to be taken lightly. This was Xianxia Palace, and Zhuofeng was his disciple. He knew his strength better than anyone. 2 fifth-rank peak emperors clashed, drawing the attention of many. It was evident that they were eager to witness a good show. The demonic figure acted recklessly, and the words had been spoken. As a prestigious sect, Xianxia Palace couldn't afford to back down. Tsk tisk. Truly the straightforwardness expected from the chief elder of Xianxia Palace. The demonic sect, Lu Yang, waved his hand and brought out 200,000 godstones, floating them in front of him. In his haste, he didn't bring much, so these godstones would serve as his bet. 200,000 godstones already surpassed the total value of many Tier 3 emperors. The chief elder of Xianxia Palace didn't back down either. However, he didn't bring out godstones. Instead, he presented a smooth-surfaced fruit. This is the Sword Dao Origin Source Fruit, a priceless treasure. Most present were sword cultivators and recognized this sword cultivation treasure. A sudden intake of breath swept through the crowd. Jian Wushuang, on the side, couldn't help but feel a strong desire for the fruit. In the front row, dozens of emperors watched this scene unfold. After witnessing it, they, too, took out some treasures, although their values were generally lower, around a few tens of thousands of divine stones. After all, the 2 contestants were not closely related to them. Zhu Jian, you'll be in charge of these treasures. No problem. Elder Zhu Jian smiled faintly. although the 13th Tai sword was one of their own. Now that he had become the notary, he couldn't show any bias. Any other friends wish to place bets? The emperors sitting at the back looked at each other. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that the big shots sitting in the first row were playing. They weren't betting on each other for fun, but to express their stance. One side supported the Tianma sect, and the other side supported the Xianxia palace. Although the two super sects were not in the same state, they would often fight. After all, such a large sect had long gone beyond a city or a state. Although it was said to be a prize, Elder Jujian had accumulated almost 1,000,000 godstones and many strange flowers and fruits. The total value exceeded 2,000,000 godstones. Such a huge bet was already comparable to the wealth of some Tier 4 emperors. In the 4 secret realms, Tier 4 emperors were peak experts, while Tier 5 imperial emperors were legendary figures. Tier 6 imperial emperors were all peak experts that were elusive. These people were the ones who roamed the heaven realm. Wait! Just as Elder Jujian was about to seal the plate, Taoist Lu Yang, the fierce demon, interrupted him. What, Brother Lu Yang? Do you still want to raise the stakes? Elder Jujian laughed. Taoist Lu Yang raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully, "This little treasure is not enough for me. I suggest that these two little fellows, whoever wins will get these treasures." The others were stunned for a moment before laughing out loud. "This is a good suggestion. I support it." Since the Grand Elder had already agreed, the others naturally had no objections. It was only 2,000,000 godstones. If it were an ordinary Tier 4 emperor, they might still be shocked, but the few Tier 4 emperors in the first row were the future backbone of the sect. They were all extremely powerful and had peak Tier 4 combat power. Which divine clan would not have more than 100,000,000? Who would be interested in such a treasure? Not to mention those Tier 5 emperors. They had long since reached the point where they did not care about the godstones. Only some powerful treasures and cultivation techniques could attract them. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up, but he didn't dare to show it. However, he was secretly shocked in his heart. These ancient sects were really rich and overbearing. Based on his current understanding, the purchasing power of 2,000,000 godstones surpassed the wealth of a Tier 4 emperor in the outside world. Other than a few heaven-defying figures, such as Demon Lord Fengyu, who had eternal treasures, there were also some who were relatively poor. For example, although he did not know much about Jin Wuyang, he could tell from the surface that it would be good if Jin Wuyang had 2,000,000 godstones. Most importantly, there were many extinct mutant fruits and treasures in the outside world. They were all common treasures in the ancient civilization. For example, the Sword Dao origin source fruit did not exist in the outside world at all. Even if it did, it would be a much weaker fruit. There were no such treasures in the cosmos, only in the depths of the river of time. However, the threshold to enter that place was at least a Tier 5 emperor, and even Tier 5 emperors could die. However, in the 4 secret realms, although the Sword Dao origin source fruit was rare, ordinary emperors could still take it out. After all, it was not extinct. No matter how many billions of years it took to be born, it would always increase. With a source, its value would decrease. A strand of thought searched around the Sumeru world. At first, he wanted to participate in the bet. However, when he heard that the final treasure would fall into the hands of the two people fighting, Jian Wushuang lost interest. The main reason was that he was poor. Otherwise, he really wanted to wave his hand and take out some treasures to liven things up. Jian Wushuang glanced at the arena and had an idea. "Elder Jujian, please wait a moment. I have a treasure here that can be used as a wager." Whoosh! He flipped his palm, and a dazzling crystal pillar appeared in his hand. This was a treasure that he had exchanged with Chuhuang. It was used to restore one's origin source, and it was a key treasure needed to restore one's ultimate origin source. The 4 secret realms had no use for this treasure, and the 4 palaces had long collected all of it. Zhuxian Divine Stone. The Xianxia Palace Master muttered silently, and a strange expression appeared in his eyes. When the other Tier 5 emperors heard this phrase, they were also shocked. They all knew that Jian Wushuang's background was not ordinary. He was from the god's tomb, but they did not expect him to take out such a long-lost treasure. Jian Wushuang felt a tremor in his heart. When he exchanged this treasure with Huang, he spent 150,000 treasure points, equivalent to at least 300,000 godstones. The crucial thing was that this treasure had disappeared from the 4 great secret realms. Even if one wanted it, they couldn't obtain it. As for its uses, they were also untraceable. Apart from overflowing into the ultimate origin source, this treasure was once a piece of the Zhuxian stone, capable of refining the origin source, making it a rare cultivation treasure. For these individuals, the value of this treasure exceeded 150,000 godstones. Young friend, treating such an important treasure as a bonus is a bit wasteful. Why not sell it to me? Said the formidable Taoist Lu Yang with heated eyes. This treasure had tremendous benefits for him. Jian Wushuang shook his head and said lightly, "If you lose, you can do whatever you want with the treasure. If you win, the rest of the treasure will be mine, and this treasure will be given to the winner between the two of them." "All right, I agree with this suggestion." Taoist Lu Yang immediately agreed. Although the others were interested in this treasure, they were not as eager as Lu Yang. However, Jian Wushuang's identity was special and he had a peak Tier 5 emperor beside him. They had to give him face and no one objected. As the host, the Xianxia Palace naturally would not quarrel with the guests over some trivial matters. "Then let's wait and see." Elder Zhujian smiled. However, when he looked at Jian Wushuang's figure, his eyes revealed a trace of indifference. The people of God's tomb indeed had a huge secret. Extinguished treasures could be taken out at will. It seemed that the days in the 4 great secret realms would probably not be peaceful in the future. He could be considered to be one of the top figures in the Xianxia Palace. He knew a lot more about some secret matters than others. The Elder Palace, established with a status equal to the Divine Temple, had long been a topic of discussion. Now, with the Tao Lord from the Grave God Mountain visiting and the formidable Emperor from the Elder Palace accompanying him, all these events served as a warning to them. Change was imminent. In the future, it wouldn't only be the Divine Temple exerting pressure on them, but also the Elder Palace, and perhaps mysterious visitors from the Grave God Mountain. Jian Wushuang, however, didn't dwell on the thoughts of others. He only aimed to acquire the least number of treasures for the maximum value. 13 golden swords. This time he couldn't escape. In the next round, he would undoubtedly have to make an appearance. These old folks also wanted to test his strength, but they dared not speak up rashly. He had no thoughts about this matter. To showcase his strength for the sake of the golden swords was a small price to pay. He didn't care about what these people were thinking. After all, if the sky were to fall, let the tall ones bear the weight. Playing with the jade tablet on his thumb, Jian Wushuang shifted his gaze to the arena. The battle for supremacy between Zhu Bachi and Zhu Weifeng was indeed deserving of the term spectacular. The two of them were extremely powerful. Even in the outside world, they were still in the top 1,000 grand yen immortals. In the 4 great secret realms, the two of them were comparable to emperors. In the outside world, they also had the battle prowess of half-step emperors. Back then, there were only a few half-step emperors on the universe deity demon list. There were around 200 of them, and they were all ultimate Tao cultivators. Now, because of the treasures in the Qixin Temple, most of the second-grade origin source Tao experts had become half-step emperors. According to his speculations, there were now over 1,000 half-step emperors. The entire original universe, vast and boundless, is much larger than the 4 great secret realms of the Qixin Temple combined. Despite its immense size, only a limited number of formidable individuals emerged. Within the Heave secret realms, the Tao Lords of the northern region alone were probably more powerful than those in the outside world. The emphasis here lies not in quantity but in quality. The sword leader of the Xianxia Palace, even in the external realms, could likely secure a spot in the top 100. His strength was comparable to the imitation eternal treasure-wielding Wan Xing, or perhaps even more formidable. Regardless of the opponent's strength, a single sword could shatter it. This kind of momentum rivaled the power of emperors in the external realms. In the current original planet, finding someone stronger than him was likely a rare occurrence. Although the Xianxia Palace held great prestige in terms of overall strength, there were still quite a few ancient sects in the northern region that surpassed it, with some even far exceeding its might. In the frigid city of the northern region, true dominion lay. Once engaged in numerous battles with the White Tiger Hall, it was eventually subdued. Despite keeping a low profile afterward, the White Tiger Temple couldn't even establish a foothold in the depths of the northern region's frigid city. This was a symbol of true strength. There were many similar sects. The Tianma sect was no weaker than the Xianxia Palace. In fact, their strengths were comparable, with the Tianma sect even surpassing the Xianxia Palace in terms of inheritance. The Xianxia Palace was founded by the ancestor of Xianxia and rose during the era of the Four Great Secret Realms. On the other hand, the Tianma sect rose during the Qixin era. At that time, the Tianma sect was even stronger than the frigid city in the northern region. The progenitor of the Tianma sect was a notorious heavenly demon with unparalleled strength, and naturally, their inheritance was formidable. Unfortunately, he was eventually slain by a divine master. Such figures were nothing but a menace if left in the Four Great Secret Realms. Although he wasn't the devouring demon lord, he wasn't much different. If he stayed, he would be a source of trouble. Zhu Bachi had received the inheritance of the heavenly demon. The demonic powerhouse was called Lu Yang because, in his demonic form, he sported 6 arms, each palm resembling a dazzling sun. He had once engaged in a bloody battle against several Tier 5 emperors and emerged victorious. Moreover, he had defeated a peak Tier 5 emperor, and if it weren't for someone coming to the rescue, that peak emperor would have perished on the spot. With such strength, even in the Xianxia Palace, he could rival the strongest of the 9 swords. This was a true powerhouse. If a 6th-order emperor lord didn't appear, the world would belong to him. The figure below, at this moment, exuded a similar aura. Haha! Is this your true strength? Zhu Baxia transformed into a 6-armed heavenly demon, wielding 6 edgeless heavy swords, driving the Zhuefeng to retreat step by step. The 6 swords attacked simultaneously, forming a single sword with 6 times the power. Zhuefeng couldn't withstand it at all, only managing to evade using its agile movements. Humph! Zhuefeng retreated hundreds of millions of miles again, vanishing into the chaotic sea of qi. But from an external perspective, the distance between the two remained only a few miles. Zhu Bachi's strength was indeed beyond his imagination. The Tai sword had already appeared, but it was still being suppressed. He's going to lose. The heavenly demon's body is too strong, even stronger than a perfected physical body, and the divine body approaches 9,000 times. Many emperors and Tao lords in the rear commented. The Grand Elder of the Xianxia Palace, however, remained indifferent. He knew his disciple the best. The true strength of the most powerful sword had yet to be revealed, and everything was uncertain. The 6-armed heavenly demon, Elder Zhujian, was somewhat surprised. He, who often led the Xianxia Palace, was well informed about many things. They compared the overall strength of the younger generation, the most telling factor of the rising or falling power of various sects. Compared to previous generations where figures like Nie Yuan emerged, or the appearance of several promising swordsmen in the same generation, this generation seemed rather ordinary. Although the current Tai sword's sword leader was powerful, there was only one, and there was no one capable of contending with him. On the other hand, Zhu Bachi was only a giant in the Tianma sect. He wasn't even in the top 10. Yet his strength was formidable. And now, with the combat power of the Tai sword added, this was problematic. The top 10 giants were probably even more powerful than the Tai sword of the Xianxia Palace. Unlike the Tianma sect, which thrived in a fierce and survival of the fittest environment, the Xianxia Palace focused more on refinement. The entire Tianma sect was like a battlefield of demons, with the identities of powerful figures changing rapidly. Except for the 13 Tai swords, the Xianxia Palace had no other Tao lords to boast about. What about the Xianxia Palace? The Grand Yen immortal power had not yet been cultivated. Once the 13 Tai swords broke through to the emperor level, there wasn't even a person. Elder Zhujian's expression remained indifferent, but in his heart he was determined. Before the arrival of the next era, the sect's resources would be tilted towards the Grand Yen immortals, even extending to ordinary mortals. This, he believed, was the foundation. A group of useless emperors, benefiting without contributing, amounted to nothing but waste. Turning his gaze to the second row where the Tao lords of the Xianxia Palace sat, he couldn't help but feel infuriated, especially the Tier 3 emperors devoid of any ambition. When they first broke through, they were full of vigor, but now all enthusiasm had waned. Among the Tier 4 emperors, none showed promise of reaching the Tier 5. The Tao lords of their generation were also unremarkable. The celestial patterns in the 4 great secret realms would soon change, and as a result, the strength of the Xianxia Palace would gradually decline. Survival seemed challenging even with a powerful sect leader, given the group of underachieving followers. Nye Yuan, Elder Zhujian silently called out. Nye Yuan, rejuvenated and no longer in a despondent state, radiated confidence. Most importantly, he had never truly abandoned his path of swordsmanship. It was thought that he had given up, but he had concealed his strength. Now, at the peak of the Tier 4, with his current momentum, the Tier 5 emperor was not far off. Such talent should never have been expelled due to a marriage dispute. It had all resulted in this unfortunate state. With these thoughts, Elder Zhujian glanced at the Grand Elder beside him, determined to bring change to the Xianxia Palace, starting from the top. At least the stubborn hearts of these old fellows had to be removed. Otherwise, the Xianxia Palace would be ruined in their generation. The burden of responsibility would ultimately fall on the younger generation. Observing the struggles below, Elder Zhujian pondered, whispering to himself, "This time, it's not bad to lose. We can't let them daydream forever." Boom! After a loud, muffled sound, Zhuifeng on the stage was smashed and sent flying tens of thousands of miles away. His entire body began to crack. He was too careless. The Grand Elder's expression changed slightly. Even Jian Wushuang couldn't help but shake his head in front of everyone. This Zhuifeng was too reckless. He constantly provoked with his agility. Originally intending to find weaknesses in Zhu Bachi, he ended up exposing his own vulnerability, heavily injured by a sword. Even his divine body shattered. It was evident that things were about to end. Annihilate! Zhu Bachi's demonic body, towering and mighty, descended with a forceful charge. Zhuifeng drew his sword again, and his aura kept rising, but halfway through, it weakened, indicating that his origin source was also damaged. "Stop!" Before Elder Zhujian could shout to stop, the Grand Elder stood up first, waving his hand to directly pull Zhuifeng out of the arena. Elder Zhujian's face changed, showing some anger. He now doubted whether Zhuifeng was the Grand Elder's illegitimate child. Did it really have to be handled this way? Even if that sword truly struck down, Zhuifeng wouldn't have perished, at most severely injured, entering a period of deep sleep. That would be beneficial, allowing him to mend his own flaws. Taoist Luyang's expression wasn't pleasant either. If it weren't for the presence of the Xianxia Palace master here, he would have burst out in anger. Was there a need for such a fierce struggle among the younger generation? Even if he wanted to stop the losses, it would be Elder Zhujian who would make a move. Would it be that Elder Zhujian would watch the fall of the Taiye sword from Xianxia Palace without taking action? Although some other emperors were somewhat dissatisfied, they dared not show it openly, only turning to congratulate Taoist Luyang. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang's expression finally improved somewhat. These people obviously didn't care about the treasures. But Jian Wushuang cared. In his view, the strengths of the two were comparable, and the intervention of the Grand Elder was within his expectations. That's why he bet on a draw. Now, it turned out that Zhuifeng was too useless. His strength had not been fully revealed, and there was a good chance for a draw. He insisted on hiding a move, waiting for the opponent's flaw. In the end, he lost. Damn it! Jian Wushuang cursed inwardly. He didn't gain any treasures, and in the end, he even lost the Zhuxian Divine Stone. Zhu Bachi's victory! Elder Zhujian shouted, and the other 12 Tai Tia's sword disciples all revealed surprised expressions. According to what the elders said, they shouldn't be the strongest. Originally, they confidently vowed to defend all the arenas without a single defeat. Who would have thought that after just a few rounds they would lose a match? They also heard that a Tao Lord had come to from Grave God Mountain, with strength even surpassing that of an emperor. Even before that person had made a move, they had lost one disciple. A pile of treasures and godstones fell in front of Zhubachi. All of these are yours. Upon hearing this, Zhubachi thought that the golden sword was not giving it to him. Immediately, a hesitant expression appeared on his face. He didn't dare to accept them and instead turned his gaze to Taoist Luyang. Take it. These treasures have nothing to do with the golden sword. Only when Taoist Luyang spoke did Zhubachi dare to accept so many treasures. Hurry up and thank these seniors, Taoist Luyang said sarcastically. Zhubachi seemed to understand and immediately bowed to express his gratitude. The people from the demonic sects were fine, but the expressions of the righteous emperors didn't look good. Especially Elder Zhujian, he didn't mind losing, nor did he bear any grudges. He just couldn't stand the actions of the Grand Elder. Next round, continue. Elder Zhujian's voice resonated like a tolling bell. Elder Nineblade's voice was like a great bell. Zhubachi had set the precedent for sword snatching this time, and the remaining princes also entered the stage. The Dao Lords sitting in the second row were all powerful figures comparable to emperors. They came here for the golden sword to gain fame. They were all figures on the verge of achieving the Dao. Winning this battle would fulfill their Dao hearts, propelling them into the realm of emperors, becoming powerful individuals. Sharuo City, Broly. A burly man with a bare upper body, white wax-like eyes, and long black hair tied up like a wild man stood up. He sat in the fifth row, inconspicuous. His aura was ordinary, and he had a full head of pitch-black long hair, bound by a headband, resembling a savage. A Dao Lord sitting in the third row couldn't help but sneer. At this point, someone is still daydreaming. In the previous rounds, most participants were wandering cultivators without any sects or schools. When they announced their names, nobody recognized them, so they had to add the name of their city in front. Qingyang Sect, 5 scatters. Jingguang City, Zhou Shang. Jian Wushuang didn't want to continue watching. There wasn't much to see. All in all, he was very interested in supreme techniques and treasures. However, these people were not that impressive. It was no wonder that the Qishan Temple would recruit inheritors from the outside world. It seemed that the cultivators of the 4 great secret realms were all trash. No matter how powerful the legacy treasures were, they could not make up for the flaws in their origin source. Yang Sanernü had known about this long ago, but he did not mind. This was also the reason why he had kept a straight face. These people were really not worthy of sitting with him. He would rather trust the puppets of the Black Turtle Temple than these trash left behind from ancient times. Grave God Mountain, Jian Wushuang. Let's exchange pointers. Jian Wushuang's figure was like a sharp blade, breaking through the air and landing directly on the last vacant arena. 13 Tai Sword of Xianxia. The 12th sword, Dream Sword Fairy. This name resembled that of someone he used to know, and Jian Wushuang didn't like it. His appearance caused a slight change in the expression of the elder Zhujian. Today, they lost at least 2 golden swords, and he couldn't quite fathom Jian Wushuang's strength. Winning against Dream Sword Fairy seemed like a fantasy. Jian Wushuang's entrance caught the attention of many among the younger generation. The mysterious Dao Lord on Grave God Mountain was even more inscrutable to them. However, some still felt that it was exaggerated. Even if he was strong, he was just a Dao Lord. With the 4 great secret realms being so vast, who would be afraid of a Dao Lord coming from a mountain? Originally, these people thought that someone of Jian Wushuang's status should challenge the sword leader, but unexpectedly, he chose to fight a woman. It truly lowered his status. Having taken the first row, he was now on the same level as those Tier 5 emperors. Such a lack of ambition. Nie Yuan didn't find anything inappropriate about Jian Wushuang. As a master of swordsmanship, he could decipher many things from every move of the sword cultivator. Martial Uncle Nie, is he very strong? The young girl Qing Luo asked cautiously. Nie Yuan nodded and said, very strong. At least a level higher than that Dream Sword Fairy. Can he defeat Tai Sword Leader? The girl had many questions in her mind and quickly followed up on Nele's response. Nie Yuan turned his head, his eyes affectionate, and said, we'll only know once they've fought. Pay attention. It'll be beneficial for you. An emperor sitting in the fourth row couldn't help but snort, mocking, "What's this?" Just hugged the thigh, and now you're already singing praises. This emperor's strength was average, but his background was strong enough for him to dare to provoke Nieyuan. The young girl Qing Luo, upon hearing this remark, was infuriated. She wanted to retort but was suppressed by Nieyuan. Humph! Emperors were incredibly powerful, yet they couldn't see through Jian Wushuang. As for those Dao lords, they were even less capable. 13 individuals ascended the arena, their battles hanging on the brink of a single thought. Jian Wushuang, Dream Sword Fairy's brow was cool, her countenance revealing pride, yet her sword was anything but. From the start, Jian Wushuang had only given her a cursory glance, assessing her swordsmanship. While she had excelled in the path of the sword, her self-created techniques were rather ordinary. Despite this, her strength secured her a place in the top 8, far from being a bottom-tier contender. The supreme skills of the 13 Taipei sword, cultivated by these individuals, seemed like an enormous waste. Not to mention the broader universe, even within the Great Sea region, if such sword techniques were disseminated, there would be many surpassing them. In the external world, the second-grade origin source Dao was at least complete without any flaws. Your Excellency is from Grave God Mountain, and also a sword cultivator. I would like to ask you for advice. Jian Wushuang extended his arm, gesturing for her to proceed. In an instant, the sound of breaking wind echoed, overshadowing all else. The two engaged in their first bout, with sword shadows intertwining in a dance across the sky. Onlookers were consumed by the spectacle, their blood boiling. Jian Wushuang, however, understood that he had yet to fully exert himself. Everything thus far was a manifestation of Dream Sword Fairy's abilities. Huh? Jian Wushuang seems not to have drawn his sword. The emperors could still see clearly. Some Dao lords, like Zhu Bachi, could also discern some subtleties, given his formidable strength. The gap is a bit large. The gaze of the Tier 5 emperors was sharp, immediately recognizing that Jian Wushuang was extraordinary. Initially, they thought it would be a fierce battle, and Dream Sword Fairy would ultimately be defeated. Now, upon closer inspection, it seemed that in a real fight, Dream Sword Fairy might not last more than 3 rounds. Adjusting his posture, Jian Wushuang's figure tilted backward, easily evading Dream Sword Fairy's attack as if it were child's play. You actually didn't use the Taipei sword? Jian Wushuang truly puzzled these swordsmen. Why were they all so arrogant? They didn't make serious moves from the start, seemingly waiting for a warm-up. It was absurd. In many ways, Zhuifeng underestimated his opponent. Jian Wushuang's strength was not much weaker than Zhu Bachi's. It was clear that Zhuifeng had ruined his own advantage during the fight. Dream Sword Fairy was somewhat surprised by Jian Wushuang's agility. What she didn't know was that Jian Wushuang had long entered the level of space origin source. In terms of spatial manipulation, he surpassed the emperors of the 4 great secret realms. Naturally, his body techniques were superior by countless levels. You haven't drawn your sword either, Dream Sword Fairy remarked. This statement might seem reasonable since he hadn't drawn his sword, and it was normal for the opponent not to use their ultimate skills. However, for Jian Wushuang, it was a disgrace because he didn't even have a divine sword worth using. This was because he did not have a divine sword that he could take out. Dream Sword Fairy held a pale blue long sword in her hand, as enchanting as a dream. It seemed to be at least a pre-celestial exquisite divine sword. Coming from an ancient sect, it was normal for her to possess such treasures. Having more treasures than those outside was justifiable, considering they were passed down from ancient times. However, Jian Wushuang's current identity originated from the mysterious Grave God Mountain. This mysterious aura not only intrigued others but even Jian Wushuang himself, as he didn't know where the Grave God Mountain was or what lay atop it. Given his current status, presenting an eternal divine sword wouldn't be excessive. Yet he refrained from doing so. He already had a peak-level ancient sword on him, acquired from Mo Long. He couldn't afford to bring out this worn-out sword and embarrass himself. Most importantly, he didn't need it. Or rather, when dealing with an opponent like Dream Sword Fairy, he didn't need to resort to using a sword. If she wanted to see his longsword, it was simple enough. I'll stand right in front of you, letting you take a good look at it at once because, well, I am the sword. Jian Wushuang's figure flickered and quickly disappeared from his original position. When he reappeared, a scorching divine sword manifested in this chaotic space. This was the transformation of heart power, the 6th level of the ultimate Tao, the Heart Sword Trial. Break! PSHHT. With incredible speed, Jian Wushuang's sword pierced through, catching many emperors off guard. Dream Sword Fairy's body disintegrated in an instant. The strike didn't harm her origin source. After all, this was Xianxia Palace, and he needed to control the force. It merely sent shockwaves through her origin source, causing her strength to plummet. She staggered and drifted in the chaotic space, finally falling to the ground. Jian Wushuang lowered his head and looked down, his figure resembling a sword, humming with resonance. That was the aftermath. The sword resonance from the aftermath was intoxicating. His hands were trembling slightly. When he had just pierced Dream Sword Fairy's body, that evil thought instantly filled his entire mind. He almost couldn't suppress his own thoughts, but the sound of the sword resonance had been reminding him all along. The devouring thoughts surged again, and he found himself adapting to them quite well. Mainly, it was the breakthrough in the extreme Tao. He had reached the 6th level, the most uncomfortable but also the fastest progressing stage. Another reason was the fragility of the natives in the 4 great secret realms. If he were to devour them, it would probably be quite easy. For Dream Sword Fairy's Sword Tao origin source, he was confident in devouring half of it. Previously, he could only devour a 10th, but now he had directly increased it to half. Devouring the Grand Yen Immortal outside might still be challenging, but the Grand Yen Immortals in the 4 great secret realms, these Tao Lords, were too fragile for him. Here, the Sword Tao was not very effective, unable to match up to the supreme techniques. However, the Extreme Tao was very well suited. Solely relying on the Extreme Tao, he could challenge the foremost Tao Lords. Just the terrifying devouring power would force emperors to evade. This was the power of the transcendent Tao Lord. Even those who had achieved Tao had to retreat. In the 4 great secret realms, there were also many Tier 1 and 2 emperors. The status of these emperors was very low, not even comparable to those Tao disciples. For those with backgrounds, it was better. They could become functionaries within the sect, handling matters that couldn't always be entrusted to the strong. Just like outside the Xianxia Palace, most of the emperors coming and going were stewards. However, as the face of the Xianxia Palace, these individuals couldn't be too weak. Most of them were Tier 2 emperors. For those without backgrounds, it was a tough situation. Keeping a low profile was advisable. Otherwise, they might be hunted down by those transcendent Tao Lords. Each transcendent Tao Lord, before reaching a consensus with Tao, would seek challenges against some emperors. Those lacking strength would challenge Tier 1 emperors. If they lost, they would retreat, and if they won, they would continue undefeated or even kill an emperor before proceeding with Tao, enhancing their momentum. This was considered the tragedy of the weak. In the original universe, such Grand Yen Immortals were very rare. No one in the Emperor level would fear a Grand Yen Immortal. The disparity in Tao comprehension was vast. Even the weakest emperor, who had mastered the origin source of space and achieved perfection in his own origin source Tao, had comprehended space. Inside the Qixin Temple, however, things were different. Only when these emperors reached Tier 3 did they comprehend the origin source of space. Many Tier 2 emperors had just touched the threshold of the origin source of space and were not as good as external Grand Yen Immortals. As for those emperors, they were even worse, almost not touching the threshold of the origin source of space. The display of his strength just now surprised the emperors above, not only because of his overwhelming power but also due to his familiarity with space. It's the aura of the origin source of space. Taoist Liang's face was ashen, and his gaze was extremely sharp. Jian Wushuang's recent footwork was elusive, and the space on the platform was under his control. How is this possible? He's just a Tao Lord. How could he have mastered the origin source of space? Many emperors were speechless. The origin source of space. Many Dao lords didn't even know what it was, let alone mastering it. People from the Tomb God Mountain are indeed extraordinary. Those who wanted to see Jian Wushuang's true strength now fully understood the immense gap. Zhu Jian, it seems like your 13 Tai Ta swords from Xianxia Palace might all be defeated by this young friend, someone remarked. Although it was the right time to mock Xianxia Palace, Taoist Luyang couldn't bring himself to smile. With a thought, a blood-colored token floating in the origin source recorded the scene and transmitted it to a distant hall in the northern region. Seems like we've found an inheritor. Inside an ancient hall hidden deep in the northern region, an almost withered arm twitched. Under the sunlight, the owner of the arm revealed a face even more terrifying than a mortuary keeper. The mortuary keeper, though lifeless, at least resembled a person. This elderly figure, with a desiccated body and an ashen, skeletal face almost buried in dust, lacked even basic human features. Little Six sent a message. The emaciated elder's arm moved slightly, adjusting a dim lamp. Above, there was a message along with an image. After watching everything that unfolded, a glint of excitement appeared in the old man's eye sockets. Inheritor! Splurt! A powerful aura began to rise, and the withered old man, as dry as kindling, instantly straightened up, becoming visibly invigorated. After countless epochs of waiting, has the true God temple finally opened? The old man's gaze, sharp as a torch, penetrated through everything. Gurgle, gurgle. The withered old man's body began to change, strands of flesh and blood power rising from the abyss below. The divine body also gradually broke through 10,000 times, 20,000 times, 30,000 times, 50,000 times, until finally it reached 68,000 times. After the complete restoration of the divine body, the old man's physical form began to peel away, leaving only a phantom of the divine body. In the abyss, a lively physical body slowly ascended. This body can guarantee you 3 days of absolute vitality. Even if by comes you can escape for your life, remember to keep to the bottom line. Jinling is resurrected, and once he makes a move, I cannot intervene to save you. The voice from the abyss was deep, cautioning the withered old man. Now the withered old man, renewed with vitality, the phantom of the divine body entered the physical body, rising directly into the air. He clenched his fist slightly, and formidable power filled his entire being. Haven't felt this way in a long time. 3 days should be enough to accomplish what one need. Be careful. The Naka clan will remember this kindness. At the same time, in the northern region, and even in the Heaven's secret realm, hundreds of figures appeared simultaneously, all similar to that withered old man. Humph! The opportunity was given to Bai Junwang. The inheritor unexpectedly appeared in the northern region. Yeah! Countless people received that message, but unfortunately, in the northern region, there was only Bai Junwang. Bai Junwang, having restored his peak strength, soared into the sky. From the depths of the northern region to Liuzhou, it only took him 3 hours. Although using a teleportation array might be faster, there was the origin source of the cosmic space in the teleportation array, guarded by Jinling. He was afraid he would be discovered as soon as he entered. He was well aware of the strength of Jinling. The incident in the Forest of Eternal Secrets had made these old folks even more vigilant. The Naka clan will certainly rise again. The true God temple cannot restrain us. Bai Junwang, a powerful deity who once roamed the world in ancient times. His strength far surpassed the ordinary Tier 6 and had reached the pinnacle. However, in the true God temple, breaking out was impossible. The origin within the true God temple was eroding him every moment. He had to abandon his physical body and the origin source, embarking on the path of divine body cultivation. Now, with a divine body 60,000 times stronger, even though it could only be maintained for 3 days, it was enough. After Bai Junwang left through space, the abyss under the ancient temple began to collapse. In the depths of the abyss, a huge eye was revealed, then began to dim. Don't rely too much on these fools. Other plans must be set in motion. I really missed the time in the giant God clan. The enormous eye finally disappeared. Inside the Xianxia Palace, Jian Wushuang calmly walked towards the tide-viewing pavilion, unaware that a peak-level powerhouse would arrive here in 3 hours, coming for him. Even someone as strong as Yang Sanmu would crumble at the first encounter. Even if the Xianxia Patriarch took action, it wouldn't last more than a few rounds. Before the terror descended, Jian Wushuang also had a sense of warning in his heart. He always felt that something was missing, but he couldn't speculate on what it might be. After returning to the tide-viewing pavilion, after a discreet exchange of greetings with those emperor-level powerhouses, he resumed his seat. Senior Yang, after obtaining the golden sword, let's return. It seems there's nothing particularly special here. Jian Wushuang transmitted his thoughts quietly. That uncomfortable feeling in his heart indeed influenced his decision-making. Originally, the plan was to finish seizing the sword and then explore other places in the Xianxia Palace. Now, there was no need. It was better to return sooner. Yang Sanmu naturally had no objections, and he replied through their mental link without any issues. Jian Wushuang nodded without saying much, glancing at the arena. He took a brief look at the demonic powerhouse, deist Lu Yang. The latter had a smile on his face, chatting with an emperor-level figure, showing no signs of anything unusual. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this demonic giant was watching him closely. After a glance, he refocused on the arena. Lu Yang appeared casual in his conversation with the emperor beside him, but he was astonished inside. He didn't know why Jian Wushuang had just looked at him. Directly meeting the gaze of an emperor was a sign of great disrespect. Even though Jian Wushuang's status was high, he should be aware of this common courtesy and usually wouldn't stare at an emperor-level powerhouse. If Jian Wushuang was looking at him because of the message he had just conveyed, it would be terrifying. The method of transmitting messages was bestowed upon him personally by the master of the Tianma sect. He had been told that even in the presence of a Tier 6 emperor, it wouldn't be detected. That's why he dared to transmit messages so boldly. Regardless, this Jian Wushuang won't live much longer. Grave God Mountain? It's just a joke. Only these fools would take it seriously. Lu Yang sneered inwardly. He knew more things than these people. The inheritors, the true God temple, and even the matters concerning the true gods, he was well informed. Most importantly, he understood where he was. And he knew where he had to go. Having grasped this point, he had a much grander goal. For this goal, he would fight to the death.